Hey friends! Glad you're here at Fanfic Adventure. We've cooked up something special. What if Naruto was the god of death who used the Rinnegan to claim Nami, Robin, and Hancock as queens? Liking and subscribing really helps us out. Okay, story time. Chapter 1, Landfall. The sea didn't know what it had swallowed. 3 days the storm had raged across the East Blue, the kind of storm that old fishermen described to their grandchildren with wide eyes and shaking hands, the kind that didn't belong in these calm waters. Lightning that didn't flicker but stayed, held in the sky like someone had grabbed it and refused to let go. Waves that rose 50 feet and crashed with the sound of mountains falling. And then, on the morning of the 4th day, the sea went completely still. Not calm. Still. The difference mattered. Calm was natural. This stillness was something else, the held breath of something enormous, the silence after a word has been spoken that cannot be taken back. The fishing village of Korta sat on the eastern lip of a small island that didn't appear on most marine charts. 300 people. 24 boats. A market that opened 3 days a week and smelled like salt fish and cheap tobacco. The kind of place the world forgot existed until it needed something from it. Old Brennan was the first one down to the shore that morning. He went every morning, had for 60 years, checking the tidal marks and talking to the water the way men his age talked to things that couldn't argue back. He was halfway through his usual complaints about his left knee when he saw the body. It was face down in the shallows, one arm stretched forward like it had been reaching for the beach even while unconscious. Young, from what Brennan could tell, lean build, sun-darkened skin, wearing clothes that were mostly destroyed, just dark fabric hanging in wet strips. Blonde hair. That was the first thing. Blonde like actual sunlight, vivid enough that Brennan squinted. He waded in without thinking about it. 60 years of fishing meant you moved toward someone in the water without debating it first. He grabbed the young man's shoulder and turned him over. The face was maybe 20 years old, maybe older. There was something about the jaw, the set of the brow, that made it hard to pin down. Whisker marks on both cheeks, 3 lines each side, faint but unmistakable, like old scars worn smooth. And his eyes were open. Violet. Ringed with concentric circles that pulsed once, slowly, like something deep underwater. Brennan stumbled backward and sat down hard in the shallows, soaking his trousers to the hip. The young man blinked. Looked at the sky. Then sat up like waking from a nap rather than washing ashore from the worst storm in living memory. He looked at his hands first. Turned them over. Flexed his fingers. Then he looked at Brennan. "Hey," he said. His voice was rougher than his face suggested, like gravel wrapped in something warm. "You okay? You look like you fell." Brennan opened and closed his mouth twice. You were, unconscious, yeah." The young man stood, and the water ran off him in sheets. He was taller than he'd looked horizontal. He looked at the village behind Brennan, at the boats, at the sky, at everything with those ringed eyes that didn't miss a single detail. "Where is this?" "East Blue," Brennan managed. "Island of Korta." Something moved behind those violet eyes. Not recognition exactly. More like a key turning in a lock that hadn't been opened in a very long time. "East Blue," he repeated quietly, tasting the words. Then, almost to himself, "Huh." He reached up and touched his own face. The whisker marks. His jaw worked silently for a moment. Then he dropped his hand and looked at Brennan with an expression that was entirely too settled for a man who just washed up from the ocean floor. "I'm Naruto," he said. "You got anything to eat?" They fed him at Brennan's kitchen table, which was the natural thing to do with a person who'd nearly drowned, and Naruto ate with the focused intensity of someone making up for a very long fast. 4 bowls of fish stew. Half a loaf of bread. A pot of tea that he drank in 3 long pulls. Brennan's wife Essa watched from the doorway with her arms folded, not afraid exactly but watchful, the way you watched a large unfamiliar animal that seemed friendly but whose full size you hadn't yet assessed. Those eyes, she said finally. Naruto looked up from his fourth bowl. Yeah. What are they? He considered this with more seriousness than the question probably warranted, turning it over, and Essa had the distinct impression he was deciding how much truth was useful rather than what version of a lie would land best. They're mine, he said. They do things. Nothing that'll cause trouble here. He paused. Unless someone causes trouble here. Then maybe some trouble. Essa looked at her husband. Brennan shrugged in the specific way of old men who have decided that whatever is happening is above their authority to manage. You remember anything? Brennan asked. Where you came from? What happened? The violet eyes went distant for a second, not vacant, more like looking at something on a screen only he could see. Flashes of things moved across his face. Something warm. Something enormous and sad. Then it closed off, gently, and he was back in the kitchen. Bits, he said. Enough. He set down his bowl and leaned back in the chair, and that was the first moment Brennan felt the weight of him, not physical weight, something else, the gravitational sense you sometimes got near waterfalls or cliff edges. I remember what I'm for, Naruto added quietly. That's enough to start. The Marines arrived by mid-morning. 2 ships, which was substantial for a place like Korda, and the villagers gathered at the docks with the specific frightened shuffle of people who'd been through this before. Not an invasion, just the particular grind of power reminding smaller things of their smallness. The ships flew Marine flags and the personal pennant of Captain Virgo Tusk, a man who had made a career out of making East Blue villages regret their fishing license violations. Naruto heard them before he saw them. He was sitting on the sea wall eating a rice ball Essa had pressed into his hands, watching the water, when the first ship rounded the headland. He watched it dock without moving. Watched the Marines file off the gangplank, 40, maybe 50 men in white uniforms, rifles and swords at their hips. Watched the captain stride down the dock like the boards had been laid specifically for his feet. Tusk was a broad man with a thick black mustache and a scar that pulled his left eye slightly downward, giving him a perpetual expression of suspicious disapproval. He had papers in one hand and what appeared to be a ledger in the other, and he looked at the assembled villagers the way an accountant looks at an overdue invoice. People of Korda, he announced, with the bored efficiency of someone reading from a script. By order of Marine Headquarters, this island is subject to an emergency taxation assessment. Fishing licenses will be reviewed. Any vessel without current certification will be confiscated. Any person who obstructs this process will be arrested. You have 2 hours to present documentation. Begin. The Marines fanned out. People started talking in frightened clusters. Naruto finished his rice ball. He dropped off the sea wall onto the dock and walked toward the captain with his hands loose at his sides, not aggressive, not in a hurry, just moving the way water moves, finding the path of least resistance while still getting exactly where it intends to go. Tusk noticed him when he was 10 feet away. The ringed eyes stopped him cold. You, the captain said. Identify yourself. Naruto. He stopped 5 feet away. The Marines around him had their hands on their weapons but hadn't drawn, something about him made the automatic reaching feel unwise, and most of them were responding to that instinct without knowing why. These people's licenses are fine. Tusk's eye twitched, the scarred one. I beg your pardon. Their licenses, Naruto said patiently, like he was explaining something to someone who'd asked a genuine question. They're fine. This, he tilted his head at the Marines spread across the dock and into the market, this isn't a license check. He looked at the ledger in Tusk's hand. That's a debt ledger. You're here to collect something someone already decided these people owe. Which means this was decided before you arrived. His violet eyes settled on Tusk's face with a quality of attention that made the captain feel briefly transparent. Who sent you? I don't answer to, I'm not asking officially. Naruto's tone hadn't changed once. No threat in it, no heat, just the calm of someone who already knows the outcome and is managing the process for everyone else's comfort. I'm asking because whoever sent you is going to be annoyed when you go back empty-handed, and I want to know if I need to do anything about them directly. Tusk stared at him. Behind Naruto, the village had gone very quiet. The Marines were looking at each other. One of them, young, 17 maybe, rifle across his chest, was staring at Naruto's eyes with his mouth slightly open. "Arrest him," Tusk said. 8 Marines moved. They made it about 4 feet. Naruto didn't raise his hands. He didn't move his feet. A pulse of force rolled out from him like a stone dropped in still water, invisible, noiseless, felt in the chest before it was understood anywhere else, and all 8 Marines sat down hard on the dock with the sudden coordinated gracelessness of puppets with cut strings. Not hurt. Just stopped. They sat there blinking, trying to remember how standing worked. "I'd rather not do that," Naruto said to Tusk, who hadn't moved and whose face had gone a careful, professional gray. "I really would. But I'm going to need you to take your people and leave. You just assaulted Marine officers." Tusk's voice was flat. A man reassembling his authority around a crisis. I sat them down." Naruto glanced at the 8 men. One of them was experimentally trying to stand. "They'll be fine. Look, there's an easier version of this where you go back to whoever sent you and tell them Korda's under different management now. No debt. No taxation review. No more visits like this." He paused. "The harder version involves me being more creative, and I don't think anyone here wants that." Tusk looked at him for a long moment. Then he looked at his men. Then he looked at those eyes, those impossible ringed violet eyes that held no particular hostility and absolutely no fear, and something in his professional calculus shifted. "Load up," he said quietly. "We're done here." The Marines filed back onto the ships with the careful dignity of people pretending a retreat is a tactical decision. The young one, the 17-year-old, looked back twice. The second time, Naruto gave him a small nod, and the kid almost tripped over the gangplank. Brennan appeared at Naruto's elbow. "That was temporary," Naruto said. He watched the ships pull away from the dock. "They'll send a report. Someone bigger will come eventually." He glanced at the old man. "You should probably be ready for that." Brennan was quiet for a moment. "What do we do?" Naruto looked at the water. "I'm thinking," he said. He was still thinking, or something that looked like thinking from the outside, when the ship arrived in the early afternoon. It was a small caravel, faster than it had any right to be given its size, running without marine flags or pirate colors, just bare masts and a hull that had been repainted recently enough that you could still smell the pitch. It came around the headland at speed and dropped anchor in the small bay south of the village docks with practiced efficiency, and then a single figure swung down to the rowing boat that was lowered over the side. Naruto watched from the sea wall. The figure rowed with the economical confidence of someone who'd spent a lot of time on water, and when the rowboat grounded on the beach and the figure stepped out, he got his first clear look. Orange hair. Not a soft orange, vivid, almost aggressive, like the sky right before a storm commits to itself. She was tall, maybe 18 or 19, in a white short-sleeve shirt and jeans, a staff across her back and a leather satchel over one shoulder that she guarded with more instinctive care than she gave to anything else. She pulled the rowboat up the beach with one hand, scanned the village with dark brown eyes that were doing rapid, professional assessment, and then those eyes landed on him. He was hard to miss. Sitting on a sea wall, blonde hair drying in the afternoon sun, violet-ringed eyes. She stopped. Looked at him. Then started walking toward the village market with the air of someone who had decided he was not her problem. He dropped off the sea wall and fell into step beside her without being invited. "Nice ship," he said. "Not mine," she said, without looking at him. "Borrowed or stolen?" "A beat." "What's the difference?" "Intention," he said. She glanced at him sideways, a quick, measuring look. He smiled, and it was a completely genuine smile, the kind that took people off guard because it didn't have any performance in it. Naruto. Not looking for friends, she said. Nami, said Brennan from the market stall they were passing, and the orange-haired girl stopped so fast that Naruto took 2 steps past her before he registered she'd stopped. The old man was smiling with the warmth of actual recognition. It's been 3 years. The calculation in her face went somewhere softer for just a second. Brennan. You still alive, you old disaster. Just barely. The old man looked between them with curiosity. You know each other? No, Nami said. Just met, Naruto agreed pleasantly. She was already moving past the stall, and Naruto watched her go with those ringed eyes that picked up things other eyes missed, the way she checked every exit in the market without appearing to look for them, the way her hand hovered near the satchel like it contained something she'd die for, the very specific way she'd clocked the direction of the marine ships that were now distant specks on the horizon and then very deliberately not reacted to them. He caught up to her in 2 easy strides. The ship you borrowed, he said. The people you borrowed it from, are they looking for it? She stopped walking. Turned to face him fully for the first time, which meant he got the full weight of those dark eyes doing their threat assessment, cataloging him, pricing his value against his risk. Up close she was more striking than the initial impression, not in a soft way but in a sharp way, all angles and intent, like a map drawn by someone who didn't tolerate inaccuracy. Why, she said flatly, would that be your business? Marine ships left an hour ago. He tilted his head toward the horizon. They'll send a report. Someone will come back, probably with more people. He watched something shift in her expression, the rapid recalculation of someone who's just had their timeline moved. I'm guessing whoever you borrowed that ship from also sent a report. So you've got 2 different sets of problems heading toward the same small island. He paused. That's what I'd call a coincidence worth managing. Nami looked at him for a long 3 seconds. You pushed Marines around this morning, she said. It wasn't a question, she'd been watching from the ship, or she'd heard it from someone in the market in the last 5 minutes. Either way she was fast. Sat them down, he said, making the same distinction he had with Tusk. With what? Her eyes went to his hands, no weapons, no weapon marks, no devil fruit smell she could identify. Then to his eyes. Those. Yeah. What are you? It was a more direct question than most people led with. He appreciated it. Something new, he said, which was true and also the most honest summary he'd managed so far. You're a navigator. Her chin came up slightly. What makes you say that? The way you read the water when you rode in. The satchel, maps, probably. And the way you looked at the sky when you came off the beach, you weren't looking at anything. You were checking wind direction and cloud formation automatically. He shrugged one shoulder. Navigator. The chin stayed up but something in her eyes shifted, not warmth exactly, more like the adjustment of a lens bringing something into focus. What do you want? She asked. Figured I'd get off this island before the next round of trouble shows up, he said. You're leaving anyway. Seemed efficient. I don't take passengers. I'm low maintenance. I don't know you. You know I sat 8 Marines down without touching them and then let them leave, he said. That's something. He looked at the satchel. I'm guessing those maps are worth more than the ship. And I'm guessing you don't have a crew. He let that land. Where are you heading? She stared at him. The market bustled around them, the sounds of a village going back to its business after the morning's shock, the smell of frying fish and sea air. A child ran past chasing a dog. Somewhere, a woman was arguing with a fruit seller about weight. Alabasta direction, Nami said finally. Grand line eventually. That's ambitious for a solo navigator. I'm aware, she said dryly. I'll go that direction. He said it simply, no pressure in it, and that was what got her. Most people pushed. He just stated. You navigate. I handle anything that comes at us sideways. We part ways whenever you want. Nami looked at him for another long moment. Then she looked at the satchel on her shoulder. Then at the horizon where the marine ships had disappeared. "You eat a lot?" she asked. "I ate 4 bowls of stew this morning," he admitted. "But I can fish." Something crossed her face, not quite a smile but the architecture of one, the shape of amusement being briefly and not quite successfully suppressed. "Fine," she said. "We leave before sunset. And you touch my maps, I throw you overboard." "Reasonable," Naruto said. They were 2 hours out of Korta when the second marine vessel caught up to them. Nami saw it first, she saw everything on the water first, which Naruto had already catalogued as a fundamental truth about her. She was at the wheel of the caravel with the evening wind in her hair, reading the rigging adjustments with the instinct of someone who'd grown up hearing the language of ships, and she clocked the pursuit vessel over her left shoulder without breaking her grip on the wheel. "Company," she said. Naruto was sitting on the bow with his feet dangling over the water, looking at the open sea like he was reacquainting himself with the concept. He turned to look at the approaching vessel without urgency. It was a marine sloop, faster than their caravel, flying the flag of someone who outranked Tusk. "Commodore Smoker," Nami said, reading the pennant through narrowed eyes. "White Hunter. He operates out of Logue Town." She looked at Naruto. "He's not the same category as those men this morning." "All right." She waited. "That's it? All right. What would you like me to say?" "I'd like you to say we should run harder." Her voice had an edge of genuine alarm in it, the first crack in her operational calm. "Smoker catches people. That's his entire reputation. He has a logia, smoke, he can turn himself into it, you can't hit him with, I can hit him," Naruto said, still watching the sloop. His tone was the same as it had been when he told Tusk to go home. The same as it was when he talked about fish. This was, apparently, just his register. "Keep your heading. Are you listening to me? He is a commodore. A logia user. He does not lose chases in the East Blue, Nami." He looked at her over his shoulder, and the ringed eyes caught the last of the evening light and did something with it that wasn't quite reflection. "Keep your heading." She kept her heading. Jaw set, knuckles slightly white on the wheel, watching the sloop close the distance with the relentless efficiency of a well-run marine vessel and a captain who didn't accept outcomes he hadn't chosen. The sloop pulled alongside in 20 minutes, close enough to hail. The man who stepped to the rail was exactly what his reputation promised: broad shoulders, white hair that the wind ignored, a cigar in his mouth, and 2 jits strapped to his back, the seastone tips catching the fading light. He looked at Nami's caravel with the flat patience of a man who'd done this many times. "Heave to," Smoker said. His voice carried across the water easily, not raised, just pitched to be heard. "This vessel is wanted property. The woman navigating it is a person of interest. Stand down and prepare to be boarded." Naruto stood up on the bow. Even at distance, Smoker's eyes found him immediately, and stayed. The Commodore was too professional to show surprise, but there was a second of stillness, an assessment happening behind those cool eyes. "She's not who you're looking for," Naruto called across the water. "And the ship's a misunderstanding. We can talk about it. I don't negotiate with civilians." "I'm not negotiating." Naruto stepped off the bow. He didn't fall. His feet found the air the same way they'd find a solid surface, and he walked across the open water between the 2 ships like it was a lane in a market, hands in his pockets, the sea surface 10 feet below him completely unbothered. Behind him, he heard Nami make a sound that wasn't quite a word. Smoker watched him cross the water. The cigar didn't move. His hands were at his sides, reading everything, calculating. Naruto stopped with 6 feet of air between them, too close for a Commodore, too far to touch, right in the space where a conversation either becomes something else or doesn't. "Smoker," he said. "Not the rank. The name. The woman back there is a navigator. She's not your priority and you know it. You came because your subordinate sent a report about something they couldn't explain. He tilted his head. I'm the something. Smoker took the cigar from his mouth, looked at it briefly, put it back. What are you? Something new, Naruto said, and it was already becoming the truest thing he said to strangers. I'm not going to fight you unless you make it necessary. But I need you to let the ship go. I don't let things go, Smoker said. Not angry. Factual. I know. Naruto looked at him, really looked, the way the Rinnegan looked at things, peeling back the surface to find what was underneath. A man who believed in justice with the ferocity of someone who'd seen enough injustice to know it was worth fighting for. Who was sufficiently angry at the comfortable corruption of the world government to keep chasing actual criminals instead of collecting the easy arrests. A genuinely good man inside a system that was genuinely broken. You let criminals go all the time, Naruto said. You just don't call it that. You call it priorities. Today I'm asking you to decide that a small navigator in a borrowed boat isn't your priority. He paused. Because I'm asking. Something moved in Smoker's jaw. Not anger. Something more complicated. You're not a devil fruit user, he said. I can tell. What you did back in Korta, what you're doing right now, he looked at Naruto's feet on the air, that's not anything I have a file for. No, Naruto agreed. It isn't. So what do I write in my report? It was an interesting question from a man like Smoker, pragmatic, almost wry, the question of someone who deals in paperwork as much as power and knows the limitations of both. Naruto almost smiled. Write whatever you want, he said. But write it honestly. Because whatever is coming into this sea, whatever I'm going to become in it, you're going to want to have been honest from the start. You're going to want people to believe you when it matters. Smoker looked at him for a long time. The wind moved between them. The two ships sat on the water like punctuation marks around a silence. Take the ship, Smoker said finally. Not warmly. The voice of a man making a strategic decision he doesn't fully understand yet. If I see that vessel again without proper license, I impound it. Fair enough. Naruto turned to walk back across the water to the caravel. He stopped after 2 steps without turning around. One more thing. There's a Marine captain named Tusk operating in this sector. He's running a debt collection scheme out of his taxation reviews. Using Marine authority as a threat vector. He said it to the air in front of him. Thought you should know. He heard the cigar move. Noted, Smoker said. Naruto walked back across the water to the caravel. Nami didn't say anything when he stepped back onto the deck. She watched him with those measuring eyes, watched the marine sloop change course and move away, and then she very deliberately looked back at the horizon ahead of them and adjusted their heading by 2 degrees east. For 20 minutes she said nothing. The ship moved. The sun went down in shades of orange and red that were excessive in their beauty, the way the sea sometimes reminded you it wasn't performing for anyone. You walked on water, she said. Yeah. And you convinced Smoker to let us go. More or less. Another pause. She adjusted a sail line without looking at him. What did you mean when you said something is coming into this sea? Something you're going to become? He leaned on the rail and looked at the darkening water. The violet eyes caught the first stars. I don't know exactly, he said, which was honest. I know what I am. I'm still figuring out what that means in a place like this. What are you? He was quiet for a moment. Not evasive, he was actually thinking about how to answer it. She could tell the difference and filed that away. You know the Shinigami, he said. The god of death. From the northern mythology, the masked figure, the death god that shinobi invoke in certain forbidden techniques. He looked at her, and there was something in those ringed eyes, not threatening, but immense, the way the ocean is immense from a small boat. Yeah, he said. That's me. More or less. She stared at him. He stared back, completely serious. Then Nami laughed, a real laugh, short and sharp, more surprised than anything else. "Right," she said. "The god of death. Washed up in a fishing village. Ate 4 bowls of stew. 5, actually. I had one more while you were getting the ship ready." She shook her head, still smiling that not quite smile. "You're insane." "Probably," he agreed. He looked at the stars coming out one by one. "But I also walked on water and sat down 8 Marines and talked Smoker out of an arrest." He shrugged one shoulder. "So?" She was quiet for a moment. "So," she said, with significantly less certainty than she'd had a minute ago. The caravel moved south-southeast under a sky that was filling with stars, and the east blue spread out around them dark and wide and full of everything that was coming, and Naruto Uzumaki, who had been a shinobi, and then something else, and was now standing on a stolen ship next to a navigator who was already halfway to trusting him whether she'd admit it or not, felt the world settle around him like a coat that fit. He didn't know what he was building yet. But he knew what he was. And in the world of the Grand Line, that was more than most people ever had. Behind them, somewhere in the dark, Smoker lit a new cigar and started writing the most unusual report of his career. Chapter 2, The Cartographer's Gamble. The maps came out on the 3rd night. Naruto had been respectful about it, genuinely, not performatively, keeping his distance from the leather satchel the way you keep distance from something a person has made clear is sacred. He'd watched Nami navigate by stars and wind and some internal compass that seemed almost supernatural in its accuracy, and he'd handled everything else, catching fish in the mornings by simply reaching into the water and pulling them out, which Nami had watched with the expression of someone updating a mental spreadsheet, and keeping the rigging in shape with an ease that suggested he'd either sailed before or learned impossibly fast. On the 3rd night she spread the maps across the chart table below deck without preamble, without invitation, just unrolled them and set weights on the corners and said, "Come look at this," over her shoulder like they'd been doing it for years. He sat across from her and looked. They were extraordinary. Not just accurate, alive, somehow, full of notations in 3 different inks that corresponded to weather patterns, current shifts, and something she'd developed herself that tracked the behavior of log poses in specific regions. The Grand Line section was a mosaic of partial charts stitched together from dozens of sources, annotated in her handwriting until the margins were completely full. "You made these," he said. "Not a question. Since I was 10. She was tracing a route with one finger, not looking at him. "Every island I've visited. Every current I've crossed. Every piece of information I could steal, trade for, or piece together from other sources." She tapped the Grand Line section. "No one has a complete chart of the Grand Line. It's not possible, the weather systems make it too variable. But a good navigator with enough data points can predict the tendencies. And you have enough data points." "Almost." She looked up. "I need about 40 more islands documented before I have what I'd consider a working predictive model." Her eyes were very direct when she talked about this, the performance stripped away, just the pure concentrated want of someone describing the thing they care most about. "That's why I'm heading for the Grand Line. To finish the map." "To finish the map," she said. Then, like she hadn't meant to say that much, "I owe a debt. Back in my village. The money I need to buy it free of Arlong." She stopped. He didn't push. Just waited, in the patient way of someone who has sat with grief long enough to know it moves at its own speed. "Arlong is a fish man," she said after a moment. "He controls my village. Has since I was a child. I've been collecting money, stealing it, mostly, to pay the price he set for the village's freedom." Her jaw was set, the softness from the map moment fully armored over again. 100 million berries. That's specific. He's specific. Her voice was flat in the particular way of old pain that's been handled so many times it's worn smooth. "The maps are part of it too. I've been making charts for him, navigating his cruise routes. In exchange he's kept his people away from Kokoyashi." She looked at the Grand Line section again. I'm almost there. 7 years of work. Almost. Naruto looked at her, the maps, the satchel, the way she held herself, the whole story of a person who'd been running a long con against someone with all the power. You're not going back to Arlong, he said. She looked up fast. You don't know, you left on a stolen ship without a crew heading for the Grand Line. He held her gaze, easy, no challenge in it. You could have gone back. You didn't. He paused. What happened? The silence stretched long enough that he thought she might not answer. Then, he took the money, she said. 93 million berries. 7 years. He took it and he called in his marine contacts and had me arrested so the count could reset. Her voice didn't shake. That was somehow worse than if it had. So I stole his navigator's ship and I left. The ringed eyes were very still. Not cold, the opposite. The particular stillness of something that runs very deep and very hot and has learned the value of surface calm. Where is Arlong? He said. East Blue. Konomi Islands. She was watching his face. Don't. Don't what? Don't do whatever you're thinking about doing. Her voice was firm. I don't need someone to fix it for me. I need, she stopped, rearranged. I need to finish the maps. I need to reach the Grand Line. I need to build enough leverage that no one can ever take anything from me again. She looked at him directly. That's what I need. He held her gaze. Nodded once, slowly. Okay. She waited for more. There wasn't more. He just accepted it, without condition, without the barely disguised skepticism that most people wrapped around their agreements, and something in her chest did a small strange thing that she chose not to examine. Okay, she said. She went back to the map. He watched her work. Outside the porthole, the East Blue went dark and wide around them, and somewhere to the south the Grand Line hummed with the particular frequency of a place that didn't follow the world's usual rules, which, Naruto was beginning to understand, was where he probably belonged. They reached Alabastus northern coastal waters on the 5th day, and the change was immediate. The East Blue had been quiet, almost deliberately so, as if the sea itself was easing him in. The waters off Alabastus coast were different. Busier. Ships in the distance that weren't marine or clearly pirate, the ambiguous middle category of people who were doing whatever survival required. The sky had a different quality, drier, and the light sat differently on the water. Nami was at the wheel, watching a merchant vessel pass 3 kilometers to their west. We need to dock somewhere for supplies, she said. And I want to check a chart source. There's a trader who operates out of Nanohana who usually has recent Grand Line positional data for the right price. How right? Expensive. She said it plainly, as a person says something they've long since accepted. I have some funds. I can help with that. She gave him a sideways look. You're the god of death. Do you have money? I have a talent for acquiring things, he said, which was vague enough that she let it go. Nanohana was a port town that smelled like flowers and dry goods and the particular grime of serious commerce. They docked mid-morning and Nami went straight to her chart source, a round-faced man named Pell who operated a map shop and information exchange behind a fabric merchant's stall, while Naruto walked the port with his hands in his pockets and his violet eyes doing the thing they did, reading the shape of a place. The thing he noticed first was the water. Not the sea. The fresh water, how people carried it, how carefully, how the vendors here didn't offer it freely the way port towns usually did. The second thing was the sand. Even here at the coast it was everywhere, fine and constant, the footprint of a desert country that had been losing the battle against its own climate. The third thing was the 2 men following Nami. Not Marina or obvious muscle. They were too casual, dressed like dock workers, but their eyes didn't do what dock workers' eyes did, they didn't look at cargo or at the docking management. They looked at her specifically, then looked away, then looked again, in the pattern of someone maintaining surveillance while pretending not to. He came up behind Nami at Pell's stall, appearing at her elbow quietly enough that she startled, which she covered as annoyance. "You have 2 people watching you," he said under his breath. "Left side, 20 meters, the one in the gray vest and his friend." She didn't look. Credited to her. Description: dressed down. Fit. Not pirates, too disciplined. Not marine, wrong posture. Private employee. She was quiet for a moment. Nodded to Pell, who handed over a rolled chart and took the coins she produced with the professional neutrality of a man who heard everything and retained only what was profitable. Then she turned away from the stall and walked toward the market at a pace that was normal but had direction. "Crocodile's people," she said quietly. "The warlord? Baroque works. He has operatives all over Alabasta. He's been trying to collect navigators and cartographers for the last year. Wants charts of the interior, the ancient routes." She glanced ahead without glancing behind. "He approached me once, 2 years ago. Sent a message. I didn't respond. And now he's sending people to collect the answer in person. Apparently." Naruto considered this for about 3 seconds. "Keep walking," he said. "Get what you need. I'll manage the 2 behind us." She almost stopped. "By manage you mean, talk to them," he said. "Probably." She looked at him. The violet eyes were calm as a sea before weather. She kept walking. He peeled off naturally, ducking into a side alley with the ease of someone who'd navigated tight spaces all his life, which in the shinobi sense was true, and came around the long way so that when the 2 men in dockworker clothes turned down the alley they'd tracked Nami into, they found Naruto leaning against the wall on the other side of it, blocking the exit. Not dramatically. Just there. Arms crossed, watching them arrive. They stopped. Looked at him. Looked at each other. "She's not who you're looking for," Naruto said. The one in the gray vest had the face of someone who'd done this kind of work long enough to not be impressed by much. "Step aside," he said. "I'd really rather not." He looked at them with those eyes that seemed to see through the performance of their confidence to the calculation underneath. "You work for Crocodile. Which means you're smart enough to assess a situation and make a decision. So assess." He tilted his head. "What do you see?" The gray vest man looked at him, really looked. At the eyes. At the way he was standing, completely relaxed, no exit watching, no tactical positioning, just present the way a wall is present. A professional stillness that didn't come from training but from something deeper. "Mr. Zero is going to want to know about you," Gray Vest said. "That's fine," Naruto said. "Tell him whatever you want. But the navigator leaves this port free, today, or the next conversation you and I have will be less comfortable than this one." He held the man's gaze. "I have nothing against you specifically. This is a professional courtesy. Don't make it something else." They left. Not quickly, with the measured pace of people making a strategic withdrawal they decided was correct. Naruto watched them go and then went back to find Nami at the ship. She was loading supplies when he returned, rolling barrels of fresh water aboard with the efficient irritation of someone doing a one-person job that required 2. He took the other side of the barrel without being asked. "Done," she said. "They'll report back. Crocodile will know we were here." "Wonderful." She didn't sound particularly afraid. Annoyed, mostly, the annoyance of someone who has a plan and keeps finding new variables in it. He's not going to just let it go. Baroque Works doesn't lose interest. "I know." They got the barrel aboard and Naruto stood on the deck, looking at the town. "Tell me about him. The real version, not the official one." She thought about it for a moment, organizing. "Smart. Genuinely. Not the theatrical smart that a lot of powerful people perform, actually strategic, patient, willing to play a long game. He's been working this region for years, building Baroque Works, positioning himself in Alabasta. She looked at the desert skyline to the south. There are rumors that he's manipulating the political situation here, that the drought, the food shortage, all of it is too convenient. That someone is engineering the country's collapse. For what purpose? The ancient weapons. She said it quietly. The poneglyphs. There's supposed to be one somewhere in Alabasta, an ancient stone that might contain the location of Pluton. She looked at him. That's the kind of thing people like Crocodile are actually after. The ringed eyes went distant for a moment. Not unfocused, the opposite, suddenly very focused on something she couldn't see. Ancient weapons, he murmured. Yeah. That's going to be a problem for a lot of people eventually. It's already a problem. She leaned on the rail. The thing I can't figure out is the timeline. Whatever he's planning in Alabasta, it's close. Things are too quiet in the wrong way. She looked at Naruto. The kind of quiet that means something is already moving. How do you know that? She held up the chart she'd bought from Pell. Ship traffic patterns. For the last 3 months, merchant vessels have been quietly rerouting around Alabasta's eastern ports. Not because of weather. Because someone, somewhere, has information that this region is about to become dangerous. She tapped the chart. Whoever has that information is connected to whoever is engineering the crisis. She looked at him with those direct, unsentimental eyes. That's Baroque works. Naruto looked at the chart in her hands. Then at her face, the intelligence in it, the way she'd assembled this picture from fragments, the mind that made extraordinary maps because it couldn't stop finding patterns in apparently random data. We should get moving, he said. Agreed. She started to roll the chart. South, then east. I want to clear Alabasta's coastal waters before, the explosion hit the port 3 streets inland before she finished the sentence. Not massive, controlled, the kind of blast that was sized for a specific purpose rather than general destruction. The sound rolled across the port and people reacted the way port people react, which was by very efficiently assessing whether the danger was heading toward them and then moving perpendicular to it. Naruto was already on the dock by the time the smoke started rising. Nami grabbed his arm. Don't. He looked at her hand on his arm. Then at her face. It's not our problem, she said, and there was something tight in her voice, not callousness, the opposite. The specific pain of someone who has learned that getting involved in other people's emergencies is a luxury they cannot afford. We need to leave. Now. While the port is distracted. He looked at the smoke. At the people running. At a child who'd gotten separated from whoever had been holding their hand, standing in the middle of the port road crying with the pure animal terror of a small person suddenly alone. He looked back at Nami. Then he walked to the child, picked them up, carried them to the nearest group of adults who looked local and were already organizing, said 3 words to the woman who seemed to be directing the group, and came back. 90 seconds, start to finish. Now we can go, he said. Nami stared at him. Then she untied the mooring line and started them moving without a word, and if something had shifted slightly in her expression, something that looked less like calculation and more like a feeling that didn't have a category yet, she kept it extremely well hidden. They were 2 kilometers out of port when the ship appeared beside them. It rose from below, not dramatically, no waves, just a large shape becoming visible from underneath in the way of something that had been there all along and decided to stop hiding. A submarine, long and dark, surfaced parallel to them so smoothly that the water barely registered it. And then a man came up from the conning tower. Crocodile was exactly what his reputation made you expect and then slightly more. The hook where his left hand should have been caught the afternoon light. The cigar was better quality than Smoker's, everything about him was calibrated, the coat, the posture, the way he looked at their small caravel with the specific expression of someone who sees things in terms of their utility. The navigator, he said. His voice was exactly as smooth as the submarine's surfacing. And the anomaly from this morning. He looked at Naruto with the considered attention of a man who has a great deal of information and is in the process of learning that this particular subject requires a different file. You sent my people back with an interesting report. Seemed efficient, Naruto said. Crocodile looked at Nami. Miss Nami. I sent you a very generous offer 2 years ago. I didn't respond, she said. Her voice was steady, though Naruto was close enough to see that her grip on the wheel had changed. No. He didn't sound bothered by it. I assumed that meant you wanted a better offer. He looked at the satchel at her feet. Those charts are worth more than any single bounty in the East Blue. And I understand your current situation, Arlong's betrayal, the debt reset, the stolen ship. He gestured at the caravel with his hook, almost expansive. I can solve all of those problems. In an afternoon. In exchange for the maps, Nami said. In exchange for your service, he corrected, pleasantly. There's a difference. I employ navigators. I don't collect charts, I collect capability. Naruto had been listening with his head tilted slightly, watching Crocodile with those eyes that took everything apart. What are you actually building? He asked. Crocodile looked at him. A real look, full assessment, not the dismissive glance he'd given the caravel. I'm sorry. Baroque works, the Alabasta situation, the ancient weapons search. Naruto said it plainly. You're not doing any of that for money. You're past money. So what is it? Something moved very briefly in Crocodile's eyes, not alarm, he was far too controlled for alarm, but the micro-expression of a man whose actual motivation has been named accurately in public, which doesn't happen often. You're perceptive, he said. It's one of the eyes. Naruto looked at him steadily. Whatever you're after in Alabasta, I don't particularly care about stopping you. But I care about her. He didn't gesture at Nami. He didn't have to. She's not available to Baroque works. Crocodile looked between them with the calibrated expression of someone doing math. You've known each other for 5 days. Give or take. And you're making claims of protection on behalf of a woman you met on a fishing beach in the East Blue. There was a faint dryness in it, not quite contempt. Crocodile was too smart for contempt, contempt was for people who hadn't done their research. Not protection, Naruto said. I'm not protecting her. She doesn't need that. He was quiet for a moment. I'm telling you she's not available. Those are different things. Nami looked at him sharply. He wasn't looking at her. Crocodile considered this for a moment that stretched past comfortable. He was a man who'd built an intelligence network across the Grand Line, who'd accumulated enough information to predict the movements of governments, who had mapped the vulnerabilities of kings. He looked at Naruto Uzumaki and found, possibly for the first time in a long time, a variable he didn't have a file for. The eyes, he said finally. What are they? Something that could see through your sand, Naruto said. Not a threat. A statement of capability, offered like a weather report. Logia immunity means physical attacks pass through. But there are types of force that don't work like physical attacks. He tilted his head. I'm not interested in a fight with you. But I'd be very bad at losing one if you started it. Crocodile was silent. The submarine sat on the water. The afternoon light moved across the hook. Where are you heading? Crocodile asked. Grand Line eventually, Naruto said. And between now and then? Still deciding. Crocodile looked at the caravel one more time. At Nami, who was watching him with the focused stillness of someone who has catalogued exactly how dangerous this situation is. At Naruto, who was watching him the same way he watched everything, with total, unhurried attention. The Grand Line, Crocodile said, almost to himself, is going to find you very interesting. He took the cigar from his mouth, looked at it briefly. As will I. He turned back toward the conning tower. Enjoy your voyage, Mr. Naruto. Mr. Naruto. He descended. The submarine slid back below the surface with the same liquid silence, leaving the water barely disturbed, and then it was gone. Nami let out a breath she'd been holding for approximately 4 minutes. "You told him you care about me," she said. "I said you weren't available." He turned back toward the bow. "Different thing. Is it?" He was quiet for a second. "I mean, you're not available to Baroque works." He glanced back at her. "That's what I meant." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she turned back to the wheel and adjusted their heading and said nothing more about it, and the caravel moved south through the afternoon, and she was very deliberate about how much of her face she let him see. They anchored that night in a small cove off an uninhabited strip of Alabastus coast, a beach backed by the first teeth of the desert, pale and still in the dark. Nami built a small fire above the tide line and spread the new chart from Pell alongside her own, cross-referencing in the firelight with a piece of charcoal and a focused silence that Naruto sat outside of comfortably, watching the sea. He was thinking about what he was, in the way he'd been avoiding thinking about it since he woke up in Brennan's kitchen. The Rinnegan pulsed slowly with its own rhythm, like a second heartbeat. He remembered things in flashes, not full scenes, more like the emotional residue of events, the feeling of having loved an enormous number of people and lost them and loved them again and then finally loved them enough to let them be okay without him. The Shinigami. The bargain. The weight of every soul he'd ever touched. He remembered that he wasn't supposed to end. That the entity that had consumed the Shinigami, merged with it, become it, that was something the world didn't get to put back in a box. And he'd woken up here, in this sea, in this body that was both familiar and strange, with all of that inside him and no particular instruction about what to do next. So he was doing the next thing. And the next thing after that. The way he'd always done it. "You're quiet," Nami said from the fire. "I'm always quiet. You're usually a different kind of quiet." She didn't look up from the chart. "Right now you're the kind of quiet that's actually loud." He looked at her. The firelight did things to her hair. He was aware of it and then aware that he was aware of it and moved on. "Do you believe me?" he said. "About what I am?" She was quiet for a moment. "I believe you're not anything I have a category for," she said carefully. "I believe the things I've seen. The water. The Marines. Smoker." She looked up. "I believe that whatever you are, it's genuine and it's substantial and it's more than I can fully measure." She held his gaze. "Is that belief?" "It's enough," he said. She nodded slowly, went back to the chart. "When we get to the Grand Line," she said, "things are going to be different. More dangerous. More, I know. You don't, actually. You haven't been there." "No," he said. "But I've been somewhere a lot more dangerous than the Grand Line, and I came back from that." He was quiet a beat. "Or I became something that came back from that. I'm still working out the grammar." She almost smiled. The charcoal moved across the paper. "Naruto," she said. "Yeah. What did you mean? When you told Crocodile I wasn't available?" The fire moved between them. Somewhere out in the dark a seabird called once and was answered. He looked at the water for a moment, then at her, directly, honestly, the way he did most things. "I meant that you're not going to spend the rest of your life running and calculating exits," he said. "You're too good for that. You deserve something that's actually yours, not 100 million berries, not a map collection, not freedom from something." He paused. "Something that's just yours because you chose it." She was very still. The charcoal had stopped moving. "And that's going to require people not being able to walk up and offer you employment like you're unclaimed," he said. "So?" He shrugged one shoulder. "That's what I meant." Nami looked at him for a long time. The firelight. The chart under her hands. The sea behind him and the stars over both of them. "You're strange," she said. "Yeah," he agreed. "Extremely strange. Almost certainly. She picked up the charcoal. Went back to the chart. But she was smiling now, a real smile this time, not the suppressed version, the actual thing, and she kept it aimed at the paper where it would be harder for him to see, which meant she almost certainly knew he could see it anyway. The storm hit before dawn. Not a natural storm. Nami knew natural storms, had been reading weather her whole life, and this came from the wrong direction at the wrong speed with the wrong temperature differential. Something had generated it, deliberately or incidentally, but it wasn't the sea's own work. She was awake before it fully formed, some navigator's instinct firing in her sleep, and she had the anchor up and the sails configured in a weather pattern before the first real gust hit. Naruto appeared on deck 10 seconds after her, already awake or never fully asleep, she couldn't tell which. "We need to move north," she said. "Get out of the wave hit them broadside." Not enormous, the caravel was small enough that a truly enormous wave would have simply ended things. This was sized for disruption, big enough to rock them hard, to shift the ballast, to send Nami sliding across the deck with her hands reaching for rigging that wasn't where she'd left it. She caught herself on the rail. The sea sprayed over the side. She looked up and through the dark and the foam she could see the shape of a ship, bigger than theirs, running without lights, positioned perfectly to have generated that wake. Running without lights in a storm in a cove that they'd chosen specifically because it didn't appear on standard charts. "They followed us," she said. "Baroque works. Had to be." Crocodile's departure had been too smooth, too unconcerned. You didn't get to be Crocodile by accepting no the first time. Naruto stood on the deck in the weather and looked at the dark ship, and his eyes lit up in a way that had nothing to do with the lightning, the Rinnegan going fully active, the concentric rings spinning slow, reading everything. The ship. The number of people on it. The one directing it. "Miss Sunday," he said quietly. It wasn't a name she'd given him. He'd read it off the ship like reading a page. "Who?" Nami said. "Second in command of Baroque Works." He was calm as a painted sea. "She's deciding right now whether to continue the approach or whether this was a bad idea." He tilted his head slightly, like listening to something. "She's smart. Smarter than the men Crocodile sent this morning. She'll factor in the report they gave and the report about our meeting in Shield." He paused. "She's turning them around." Nami watched the dark ship's running lights come on. Watched it change course. "How do you know what she's thinking?" "I can see souls," he said simply. "Not thoughts. But intent. Enough to read a decision being made." She stared at him. The storm was already easing, the artificially generated chop settling as the ship moved away, the sea remembering its natural patterns. She was soaked to the skin. The chart was below deck, secured, safe. She'd learned to always secure the charts first. "You can see souls," she said. "It's the eyes." He looked at her. "Are you all right?" She was wet and her shoulder hurt from hitting the rail, and she was standing on a stolen ship in a cove off Alabastus coast, having just been targeted by a warlord's intelligence network. She assessed this comprehensively and decided that the correct answer was, functional. "I'm fine," she said. "Help me check the hull." They checked the hull together, moving through the dark ship with a lantern, and it was fine. The caravel was solidly built, whatever else it was. When they came back up, the storm was gone, the stars were back, and the sea was making the specific sound it makes at 3 in the morning when it's not trying to kill anyone. Nami sat on the deck with her back against the mast. Not something she usually did, she was usually in motion, usually managing something. But the adrenaline had a tail end and it wanted a minute. Naruto sat down next to her. Not so close it was intrusive. Not so far it was a gesture. Just there. "Thank you," she said. After a moment. "For before. With Crocodile. You'd have handled it." "Maybe." She looked at the stars. "Probably not as well." He said nothing. Which was, she was learning, his way of accepting something without making it larger than it needed to be. "I want to go back," she said. "To my village. Eventually. But not like this. Not broke and hunted." She said it to the stars rather than to him, the way you say things you've been not saying. "I want to go back when I have enough to make it stick. When I can fix it permanently, not just pay a number that someone will move again." "Then we build something permanent," Naruto said. She looked at him. "Not in a week," he said. "But that's the direction." He was looking at the water. "A navigator who can read the Grand Line and he seemed to consider how to complete the sentence. "And whatever I am. That's not a small thing." "What are you building toward?" she asked. "Specifically." He was quiet for a while. Long enough that she almost thought he wasn't going to answer. "Something that doesn't need anyone's permission," he said finally. "Something that stands on its own. Not inside the world government's framework, not inside piracy, not inside any system that someone else built." He looked at her. "I died saving a world that had a lot of systems and most of them failed everyone eventually. I'm not interested in inheriting those." She held his gaze. The ringed eyes in the starlight were extraordinary, not frightening, just immense, like looking at depth rather than distance. "That's ambitious," she said softly. "I have time," he said. She laughed at that, a short, genuine sound, and leaned her head back against the mast and looked at the sky. And when, 20 minutes later, she fell asleep sitting up in the way of someone whose body finally insisted, Naruto stayed where he was and watched the water and kept watch without being asked, and the sea around them was perfectly, genuinely still. In the morning she woke with her head on his shoulder and chose, very deliberately, not to address it, and he had the decency to also not address it, and they made coffee below deck and looked at maps and argued about the heading east with the comfortable efficiency of people who have already, without quite saying so, decided to keep going in the same direction. Somewhere below the water, a submarine moved north, carrying a report to a patient man with a hook and a long game. He would read it twice, set it aside, and open a new file. He gave it no name yet. He left the top line blank. He was, if nothing else, a man who knew when something was worth waiting to understand. Chapter 3, Bones of History. The island had no name on any chart Nami owned. It showed up as a blank space between two Grand Line waypoints, not the aggressive blankness of an uncharted region, more like someone had looked at this particular coordinate and decided, collectively and over generations, that writing nothing was the safest notation. The log pose had been pointing at it for 2 days with the stubborn insistence of a compass that doesn't care about your opinion, and when the island finally materialized out of the morning fog, Nami stood at the bow and understood why. It was ruins. All of it. An entire civilization skeleton bleached by salt air and time, towers that had fallen so long ago that trees were growing through the collapse, root systems and stonework having negotiated a slow peace. The harbor was still technically functional, the breakwater held, the depth was right, but the dock was black wood that had gone past gray into something that looked almost mineral, and the city behind it was the city only in the geological sense, the way riverbeds are still rivers. Someone lived here, Nami said. A lot of someones, Naruto said. He was looking at the ruins with an expression she'd started to recognize, the Rinnegan doing its deep reading, peeling back time. A long time ago. How long? Centuries at least. He was quiet a moment. The stones remember things. Not clearly. More like. He seemed to search for the word. Like walking through a room where something important happened and you can feel the shape of it without seeing what it was. She looked at him sideways. You can read ancient architecture emotionally. Is that strange? That's absolutely strange. He almost smiled. There's someone here. Alive, I mean. In the central ruins, maybe half a kilometer inland. Nami looked at the fog-softened silhouette of the dead city. One person. Two groups, he said. One person in the middle. Two groups around her, not touching her yet, but, his eyes tracked something she couldn't see. Soon. She was already moving to drop the anchor. They came in through the harbor and up through streets that had been wide enough once for a city that believed in itself. The cobblestones were intact under a layer of moss and encroaching root, and occasionally Naruto would stop and press one hand flat against a wall and read something from it that he didn't explain aloud, and Nami had stopped asking and started noting the way his expression changed when he did it, not sad exactly, but the way a person looks when they hear music they haven't thought about in years. The two groups he'd sensed were visible before they reached the central square. One was positioned north, 8 men in dark coats with the particular stillness of professionals waiting for a signal. The other was east, 5 men, different coats, the same stillness. Both of them were watching the center of the square where a single figure sat cross-legged on a stone that was too regular to be rubble, too positioned to be accident. An altar, or what had been one. She was reading. Not a book, a stone. A massive upright slab of black rock, covered top to bottom in carved text that was too worn in places and too sharp in others, inconsistent in the way of something that had been added to across generations. She had both hands on its surface, fingers moving across the carvings with the slow precision of someone reading Braille, and her eyes were closed. Nami stopped walking. Naruto stopped beside her. The woman at the stone was perhaps 20, it was hard to tell from this distance, but there was something about the stillness of her that suggested the kind of age that isn't counted in years. Long dark hair. A white coat over a red top, which was a strange choice for someone sitting in the middle of what amounted to a standoff. Her hands moved across the stone with total concentration, as if the two groups of armed professionals surrounding her at a distance were simply not the most important thing happening. She knows they're there, Naruto said quietly. She doesn't look worried about it. She doesn't look like she's ever been worried about anything that isn't made of stone, he said, and there was something in his voice that Nami couldn't fully classify, not admiration exactly, more like recognition. Like looking at something you understand before you understand that you understand it. One of the men in the north group raised his hand. The 8 of them started moving. Naruto was already moving too. He didn't run. He walked at a pace that somehow arrived at the square before anyone else did, the way water moves faster than it looks like it's moving, and he stepped between the approaching men and the woman at the stone with the unconcerned air of someone choosing a spot to stand. The lead man stopped. He was professionally anonymous, medium height, trimmed beard, the kind of face a good intelligence operative cultivated because it was hard to describe afterward. "Step away," he said. "This doesn't concern you." "Define this," Naruto said. "Government business." "Which government?" A pause. More honest than intended. "World government." Naruto looked at the woman at the stone over his shoulder. She had opened her eyes. They were dark and extraordinarily calm, and they were looking at him with the same quality of attention she'd given the poneglyph, which was the highest category of attention she apparently had. "She reading something you want?" Naruto asked the government man. "She's reading something classified." "It's a rock," Naruto said. "It's been here for centuries." "I don't think classification is," the man lunged. He was fast, genuinely, the practice speed of a trained operative, and his colleagues came with him, and the East group started moving too, and for about 2 seconds the ancient square was full of coordinated professional violence all heading for the same point. Then Naruto exhaled. It wasn't dramatic. No visible effect, no flash, no sound. Just a slow breath out, and the Rinnegan opened fully, all 6 paths of it running behind his eyes, and every person in that square who was moving with intent to harm stopped as completely as if the concept of forward motion had been temporarily suspended. 8 men from the north. 5 from the east. Standing mid-stride like a room of stopped clocks. Not unconscious. Awake. They could breathe, blink, feel the stone under their feet. They just couldn't move toward anything. The square was completely silent except for the wind. Nami arrived 30 seconds later and stopped at the entrance, looked at the scene, and said nothing for a moment. "You could have waited for me," she said finally. You'd have told me to be careful, he said. I would have been right. He turned to look at the woman at the stone. She was still sitting. Still looking at him. The quality of her attention had not changed, but something in it had deepened, the way still water deepens when you look longer. You read it, he said. Enough of it. Her voice was like the rest of her, calm, precise, with the particular quality of someone who has trained every natural reaction into something more deliberate. The western passage is partially obscured. There's a continuation. She looked at the poneglyph behind her. Somewhere. Where? That's the question every interested party in this square would like answered. She glanced at the frozen men around them with something that was almost dry amusement. You've created a temporary problem. They'll be able to move again in about 10 minutes, he said. Enough time to have this conversation and leave. She looked at him fully. The dark eyes moved across him the way her fingers had moved across the stone, reading, cataloging, finding the shape of something in the dark. What are you? She said. Something new, Nami said from the square entrance, because she'd heard him say it enough times to know it was his standard answer, and also because she was watching the frozen men and had a navigator's relationship with time limits. We need to move. The woman stood from the altar stone in one fluid motion, and Naruto noticed that she moved like someone who had spent time in dark places, economical, quiet, always knowing exactly where her feet were. She had a small journal, which she slipped inside her coat with the practiced speed of someone who'd had to hide things quickly before. Nico Robin, she said. Not to the square. To him specifically, as if Nami's presence was noted but his name was the priority exchange. Naruto. She looked at his eyes. At the Rinnegan, which was still active, still reading everything. She looked at it the way she'd looked at the stone, as a text, something that contained information if you knew how to read it. You see the past, she said. In objects. In places. Sometimes. And you were drawn to this island. He paused. The log pose pointed here. Log poses don't point at dead islands, she said, with the certainty of someone who had spent years navigating by them. They point at magnetic sources. This island's magnetic field collapsed centuries ago. There's nothing here for a log pose to lock onto. She held his gaze. So why did yours point here? He was quiet for a moment. He hadn't actually thought about that. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the log pose he'd picked up in Nanohana. He hadn't bought it, it had just appeared on a market table as if it had been waiting, and looked at the needle. It was pointing straight down. At the ground. At the stone. At whatever the poneglyph was sitting on top of. Ha, he said. There's something under this altar, Robin said. I thought so before you arrived. The stone placement is deliberate, it marks something, doesn't just stand on it. She looked at the frozen men. I didn't have time to investigate. Naruto looked at the altar stone. Then he crouched and pressed both palms flat to the ground and closed his eyes, and the Rinnegan went deep, reading the earth layers the way it read everything else, and Nami watched the expression on his face move through several things in the space of 10 seconds. He opened his eyes. Stood up. There's a chamber, he said. About 4 meters down. Old. Much older than the city. How do you access it? Robin asked, with the focused certainty of someone crossing off the next step in a checklist. He looked at the altar stone. It weighed, by appearance, several tons. He reached out with one hand. The stone moved. Not effortfully, the way a door moves when you know where the hinge is. It slid to the side on some mechanism built into its base that had been locked for centuries, the stone grinding against stone with a sound like a giant clearing its throat, and beneath it a staircase went down into darkness that smelled like old air and something deeper than old air, like the breath of something sealed. Robin was already moving toward it. Wait, Nami said. She was looking at the frozen men, who still had approximately 6 minutes of stillness left. We'll be quick, Robin said, and descended without waiting, which was the most decisive thing Naruto had seen anyone do since he'd arrived in this world. He followed. Nami made a sound of pure exasperation and followed them both. The chamber was small and absolute. Four walls, a low ceiling, a floor of the same black stone as the poneglyph above. The air was old enough to taste, cool and still in the way of spaces that haven't been touched by weather in a very long time. And on the far wall, covering it completely, was text. Robin pressed both hands to it before either of them had taken a full breath of the chamber's air, and she read with the focused speed of someone fluent in a language most people didn't know existed. Her lips moved slightly. Her eyes tracked. Her fingers found the carved lines and followed them with the same intimacy she'd given the stone above. Nami held the lantern and watched the woman's face. Naruto stood at the entrance to the stairs and watched everything. "It's a continuation," Robin said, almost to herself. "The same record. The western passage from above connects here." Her fingers stopped. Moved back. "There's a name." She went still. "Pluton's anchorage," she said quietly. "Not the weapon. The place where it was last kept before it was moved." She lifted both hands from the stone. "And where the next record is?" She turned. "Raftel." "The end of the Grand Line," Nami said. "The end of the Grand Line." Robin's voice was very controlled. Too controlled, the way water is controlled behind a dam. "This is," she stopped. Took a breath. "Put the control back in place. This is the second piece of a record I've been searching for since I was 8 years old." Naruto looked at her. Not with the reading gaze, just with attention. "Since you were 8, he said. "O'Hara," she said. It was a name, but she said it the way you say a name that is also a wound. "My home." The scholars there were researching the void century, the 100 years missing from history. The world government destroyed it. Everyone there. She said it with perfect flatness, the flatness of something that has been said so many times it's worn down to its chemical components, all the grief extracted, just the facts remaining. "I've been running since I was 8 years old. And reading every poneglyph I can find. To find out what they destroyed O'Hara to hide," Nami said softly. "To find out the truth." Robin looked at her briefly. Then back at Naruto. "There's a bounty on my head that's currently 79 million berries. World government. I've been hunted my entire life." She said this, Naruto noted, not as a complaint but as information. "The men outside, one group is CP9. One group is Baroque Works. Crocodile's people," Nami said. "He wants the poneglyphs too," Robin said. "Specifically the information about the ancient weapons. We've had an arrangement. It's recent and provisional and I don't trust it." She said the last part with the careful honesty of someone who has learned that acknowledging distrust is the only accurate statement she can make about almost all relationships. "What was the arrangement?" Naruto asked. A pause. Something that might have been discomfort in anyone with a less disciplined face. "Information for protection," she said. "He has resources I don't. I have access to things he can't read." She looked at her own hands. "It's been useful. And I've been careful." "Not careful enough," Nami said. "Not unkindly. They both followed you here." "Yes." She looked at the stairs. "We have perhaps 4 minutes." Naruto looked at the wall. At the text that Robin had just read. Then he pressed both hands to it and the Rinnegan went deep and he read it in a completely different way, not the language, which he didn't know, but the memory in the stone, the intention of the hands that had carved it, the feeling of what it meant to the person who had done this work. He stood there for maybe 30 seconds. When he pulled his hands away his expression was different. Heavier, but not burdened, the way a face looks when something important has been confirmed. "The people who made this," he said. "They weren't trying to hide it from everyone. They were trying to hide it from one specific thing. He looked at Robin. The world government wasn't the first version of itself. What they're hiding isn't just what happened in the Void Century. It's what they are, what they were built to cover. Robin was very still. You read that from the stone. I read it from the hands that made it, he said. From the person who was afraid and did this work anyway. He looked at her. They wanted someone to find it. They built the whole system, the poneglyphs, the routes, all of it, like a letter they wrote to someone they'd never meet. He paused. You're who they wrote it to. Robin looked at him for a long moment. Something moved in her face. Not the controlled surface, underneath it, in the place below the place she showed people. A flash of something enormous and old and so carefully kept that it barely knew how to exist in the open anymore. It was there for 1 second and then the control came back, smooth and complete. But he'd seen it. And she knew he'd seen it. We should go, she said. The frozen men were just beginning to remember how their legs worked when the three of them came up the stairs. Robin walked out of the square heading west without looking at any of them, which was the most completely unbothered exit Naruto had seen anyone make. Nami was slightly less unbothered, moving fast with her hand on her staff, and Naruto came last, watching the men shake off the remnants of what he'd done and look at each other with the expressions of people comparing notes on a shared hallucination. The CP9 lead, the trim-bearded professional, looked at Naruto as he passed. You'll be reported, he said. I know, Naruto said, without stopping. They were through the dead city's outer streets before the groups in the square had fully organized a response, and by the time anyone moved to follow them, Robin had already climbed a ruined tower section with the efficient speed of someone who had escaped from a lot of places, identified a route through the collapsed western district that was invisible until you were standing in it, and was leading them through it at a pace that made clear she'd mapped this city in her head the moment she'd arrived. How long were you on this island? Nami asked, climbing over a section of fallen wall. For days, Robin said. She didn't slow down. And you memorized the layout. I always memorize the layout. Nami looked at Naruto. He shrugged one shoulder. She shook her head and climbed the next wall section. They reached the harbor with the CP9 group still somewhere in the ruins behind them. Robin's route had added distance but subtracted pursuit, and Naruto looked at Robin's situation with the practical clarity he looked at most things. Your ship, he said. Scuttled, she said, without visible emotion. When I arrived. The CP9 had already identified it. I sank it to eliminate a leverage point. Nami stared at her. You sank your own ship. It was a borrowed ship. Nami looked at Naruto. She sank a borrowed ship. I borrowed mine too, he pointed out. I stole mine, technically, she stopped. This is not the point. The point is, she looked at Robin. You need a ship. Apparently. Robin looked at the caravel. Then at Nami. Then at Naruto. The dark eyes doing their deep reading. You're going to the Grand Line. Eventually, Nami said. I've been to the Grand Line, Robin said. I've navigated sections of it alone. I know islands that aren't on any standard chart. She looked at the satchel on Nami's shoulder. And you have the most interesting cartographic work I've seen outside of a government archive. She'd clocked the maps in 30 seconds. Of course she had. Between your navigation and my knowledge of the poneglyph routes, you want to come with us, Nami said. I'm proposing a mutually beneficial arrangement, Robin said. Then, with the precision of someone who has lived in inaccuracy long enough to find it offensive, and yes. I want to come with you. Nami looked at Naruto. He was watching Robin with that expression, the recognition one. She was starting to think it meant something specific but hadn't pinned it down yet. Fine, Nami said. But touch my maps without asking and I'll throw me overboard. Robin said. Yes. Understood. Robin picked up the single bag she'd had under her coat, small, impossibly compact for 4 days on a dead island, which said everything. "Shall we?" They were 20 meters out of the harbor when the shape appeared on the ruin's highest intact tower. Not the CP-9. Different silhouette. Tall, impossibly still, dressed in black with a sword at his hip that even at this distance had a quality about it that made the air around it feel considered. He was watching the caravel leave with no urgency and no attempt to intercept, just watching, in the manner of something that has made a decision and is in no rush about the execution. Nami saw him. Robin saw him. "My hawk," Robin said quietly. "The warlord," Nami said. Her voice had changed register slightly. "The greatest swordsman in the world. What is he doing on a dead island?" "The same thing draws powerful people to poneglyphs," Robin said. "Information. He's been collecting it for years, not for the world government, not for any crew. For himself." Naruto was looking at the figure on the tower. The Rinnegan reading him across the distance and the water. "He's going to find us," he said. "How do you know?" Nami said. "Because he already decided to." He watched the still figure. "He's curious. That's more dangerous than angry." He turned away from the tower. "Let him come. I'm not going anywhere." My hawk found them the next evening. He didn't announce it. His ship, black, severe, built for one, appeared off their port side at dusk like it had always been there and they'd simply failed to notice it. Which was, Nami reflected, probably the intended effect. He came across the water in a small boat, rowing with the unhurried elegance of someone who had never in his life done anything urgently because urgency implied the possibility of failure. He came aboard without being invited, which was the maritime equivalent of kicking down a door, except he did it with such complete composure that it felt more like a natural law than a violation. He was taller than he looked from a distance. The eyes were gold and the kind of still that had depth in it, not blankness. He looked at the ship, at Nami, at Robin, and then at Naruto, and that was where his gaze stayed. "I've heard of eyes like those," he said. His voice was exactly what you'd expect, measured, dry, containing the specific confidence of someone who has never needed volume. "In stories. Very old stories." "And?" Naruto said. "I wanted to see if they were real." He looked at the Rinnegan directly, which most people avoided instinctively. He didn't. "They're real." "Congratulations," Naruto said. "Is that it?" Something moved in my hawk's expression, not offense, something closer to interest being confirmed. "No," he said. He looked at Robin briefly. "You read the stone?" "Yes," Robin said. "What did it say?" "Nothing, I'll share," she said pleasantly, with the serene finality of someone closing a door. My hawk accepted this. He looked back at Naruto. "You fought the CP-9 group." "Stopped them," Naruto said. "Didn't fight. There's a distinction you make consistently." My hawk tilted his head slightly. "You don't consider what you do to be fighting." "I consider it management." "That's either very confident or very stupid," my hawk said. "You'd know the difference," Naruto said. "Which do you think it is?" A pause. The gold eyes considering. "Confident," he said. "Which is more interesting and more concerning?" He looked at the sword at his own hip, not touching it, just a glance, the way a musician might glance at an instrument. "I'd like to understand what you are." "You could ask." "I'm asking." Naruto looked at him for a moment. Not the same way he'd looked at Crocodile he'd read quickly, filed, managed. My hawk he looked at with something more like actual consideration, one weight taking the measure of another. "You've spent your entire life pursuing the idea that strength is the only honest thing," he said. "That everything else, connection, purpose, belonging, is either a weakness or a lie people tell themselves. And you've gotten so strong that you've proven yourself right, because nothing can touch you." He paused. "The problem is that being untouchable and being alive are different things." My hawk was very still, Not the trained stillness of a combatant. The stillness of someone who has been accurately described. You got that from my soul, he said. I got that from looking at you, Naruto said. The soul confirmed it. A long silence. On the water around them the evening settled, the specific beautiful cruelty of the Grand Line's entry waters at dusk, the colors that had no names in normal language. You're not a swordsman, Mihawk said. No. But you fight. When I need to. Show me, Mihawk said. Not aggressively. Genuinely. The way a scholar says show me when they've found a primary source. You want to spar with a god, Nami said from the wheel, in the tone of someone who cannot believe they are having this conversation. I want to understand what I'm looking at, Mihawk said, without looking at her. There's a difference. Naruto looked at the deck. At the limited space. Then at the water. Off the ship, he said. You'll damage it. Mihawk stepped off the rail without hesitation and stood on the water's surface, and Naruto stepped off the other rail, and the two of them stood on the open sea in the last of the evening light while Nami and Robin watched from the deck with very different expressions. Nami's was the expression of someone calculating escape routes, Robin's was the expression of someone watching something they want to memorize. Mihawk drew the black blade. It was enormous, ridiculous in its proportions, and completely right in his hands, the way things are right when they've found what they were made for. He held it low and sideways, the classic opening, not aggressive, analytical, the opening of a man who reads opponents before he commits. Naruto stood across from him with empty hands and the Rinnegan fully open and no particular stance because he didn't need one. Mihawk moved first. He was extraordinary, Naruto could feel it before the blade came, the weight and intention of someone who had refined a single skill past the point where refinement had categories, and the first cut came in flat and fast at a height that gave nothing away, testing, feeling. Naruto stepped inside it. Not dodged, inside, into the space that should have been impossible to occupy after the blade committed, and he redirected Mihawk's wrist with 2 fingers, not a block but a guidance, the blade going wide by 3 inches, and the momentum of it pulled Mihawk 1 step forward. Neither of them moved for a second. Then Mihawk reset. His expression had changed, the analytical look had acquired a component that was very close to alive. He came again, faster, a sequence this time, 3 cuts in a geometry that closed all the angles, and Naruto moved through all 3 with the specific quality of someone who isn't evading so much as existing in the spaces between things, and the blade never touched him, and he didn't hit Mihawk once, and after the 3rd cut they were 3 feet apart and still. You're not fighting back, Mihawk said. You're not trying to kill me, Naruto said. So there's nothing to fight back against. What if I were trying to kill you? Naruto looked at him. The ringed eyes with the evening sky behind them. Then we'd be having a different conversation. Mihawk looked at the blade in his hand. At the empty space where it should have made contact 3 times. Then at the man across from him, the impossible eyes, the complete stillness, the warmth that somehow coexisted with the weight of something very old and very certain. He sheathed the blade. You're not a swordsman, he said again, but this time it wasn't a category. It was an acknowledgement. No, Naruto agreed. What you do, Mihawk paused. It was a pause from a man who used words economically and was currently spending more than his budget. It comes from a different source than strength. It comes from having already lost everything and found out that what you are doesn't go away even then, Naruto said. That's what's left when you strip everything else away. He looked at the black blade. That's what you're actually looking for, I think. You just got to it by going in the opposite direction. Mihawk stood on the water and looked at him for a long time. You're going to the Grand Line, he said finally. Yes. The Yonko will notice you. Good. Something passed through Mihawk's expression, not quite a smile, but the architectural predecessor of one, the shape amusement takes before it decides whether to become visible. Good, he repeated. You said good. Is there a problem with good? No, Mihawk said. I find it. He looked at the sword again. Refreshing. He looked past Naruto at the ship. At Robin on the deck with her dark eyes and her careful expression and her journal under her coat. At Nami with her hair and her maps and her staff and her particular brand of focused intensity. Something moved in his assessment. You're collecting people, he said. I'm not collecting anyone, Naruto said. You're being collected by them, Mihawk corrected, with the precision of a man who means what he says. Naruto looked back at the ship. At Nami, who was pretending to check the rigging and absolutely listening. At Robin, who wasn't pretending anything, just watching with those bottomless dark eyes that had decided he was the most interesting primary source she'd found in years. Maybe, he said. Mihawk looked at the horizon. At the entry to the Grand Line, which was visible from here as a change in the water's texture, the sea becoming something else. I'll hear about you, he said. It wasn't a threat. More like a note to himself. You will, Naruto agreed. Mihawk stepped back to his ship with the same easy economy he'd arrived with, and the black vessel moved away into the dark, and Naruto walked back across the water to the caravel and stepped aboard, and Robin was looking at him with those eyes that read everything. He respected you, she said. He respected that I was honest, Naruto said. With Mihawk those are the same thing. She looked at the direction his ship had gone. He's been called the most solitary man on the Grand Line. He doesn't respect things he doesn't understand. She paused. He understood you. He understood part of me, Naruto said. The part one showed him. She looked at him. What's the part you didn't show him? He met her gaze. The Rinnegan finding the shape of her, the child who had watched an island burn, the scholar who had eaten loneliness for 20 years and decided to be nourished by it rather than killed by it, the woman who had turned grief into the most profound intellectual purpose he'd ever encountered in any world. The part that knows why you sit down to read a poneglyph like it's a letter from someone you loved, he said. Because it is. Robin was completely still. The careful control, the constructed distance, all of it was present, and under all of it, that flash again. That thing that barely knew how to exist in the open. They wrote it for anyone who would listen, she said quietly. For anyone who cared enough to find it. And you're the only one who did, he said. For centuries, maybe. You're the only one. He held her gaze. That's not loneliness. That's a calling. The dark eyes looked at him with an intensity that had nothing academic in it. For 3 full seconds Robin said nothing, which was, he was learning, the most she ever showed, the silence where the thing she actually felt lived. Then Nami said, from the wheel, if the two of you are done being profound, I'd like to point out that the Grand Line is 40 kilometers north and I'd like to enter it in daylight like a person with a functional survival instinct. Robin looked away. Composed. Perfectly arranged. She's right, she said. She usually is, Naruto said. Nami made a sound that was partially about the heading adjustment and mostly about the fact that no one had asked her permission before any of the things that had happened today, and she made this sound at approximately the volume of someone who wants it heard, and Robin sat down near the bow with her journal and wrote in it with quick, precise strokes. And Naruto sat on the rail and watched the stars come out over the Grand Line and felt the shape of what he was building become slightly more defined. Not a crew. Not a court. Something that didn't have a word yet, in this world or the last one. Something that was choosing itself, piece by piece, in the specific way that real things are made, not all at once, but each part finding the next part like words finding their sentence. He touched the Rinnegan lightly. It pulsed. Below the ship, below the water, below the ocean floor, the bones of old civilizations lay in their dark beds, holding their stories with the patient certainty of things that know someone will eventually come to listen. The caravel moved north. The Grand Line waited. Chapter 4, The Snake Princess and the God Amazon Lily appeared on the horizon like a rumor that turned out to be true. The island rose from the sea in shades of green so saturated they looked painted, the kind of green that happened when a place had been left completely alone for long enough to remember what it wanted to be. Flowers the size of cart wheels grew along the cliffs. The waterfall that fell from the eastern face hit the sea 200 meters below with a sound like continuous applause. And the women, the warriors visible even from this distance on the cliff tops, moving with the fluid economy of people who had been dangerous since before they could walk, watched the approaching caravel with the still attention of a place that didn't receive visitors. It received intruders. Occasionally. And dealt with them accordingly. "This is a bad idea," Nami said, for the third time. "You said that about the dead island," Naruto said. "The dead island had CP9 and Mihawk and a warlord confrontation. I was correct that it was a bad idea. It worked out. That's not the same as it not being a bad idea." She was gripping the wheel with both hands, watching the cliffs. "Amazon Lily is a closed nation. No men. The law is literal, men who land here are executed. It's not a rule, it's a cultural, I'm aware," he said. "You're aware," she repeated. And the log pose points there," he said, with the same unconcerned tone he used for everything that would make any reasonable person reconsider their choices. "So that's where we go." Nami looked at Robin. "I've been here once before," Robin said, from her position at the bow. She was looking at the island with a scholar's hunger and a very pragmatic assessment of the risks. "They tolerated me because I was alone and female and clearly more interested in their poneglyph than in them." She paused. "The situation is different now." "Because of me," Naruto said. "Because of you," she confirmed. He looked at the island. The Rinnegan reading the shape of the place, the patterns of movement on the cliffs, the organization of the watch positions, the particular quality of a community that had been self-sufficient for so long that it had developed a kind of gravity, pulling everything it needed from within. It was extraordinary, he thought. Built by women who had decided that the rest of the world's categories didn't apply to them, and had been so completely right about that decision that the world had eventually left them alone. He respected it entirely. Which was why he wasn't going to pretend to be something he wasn't to get inside it. "Bring us in straight," he said. "Main dock. No approach angles." Nami stared at him. "You want to dock openly? On Amazon Lily? As a man?" "Yes. They will shoot arrows at us." "Probably," he said. "Before or after the execution? I'll let you know." She turned back to the wheel with the expression of someone who has accepted that their survival instincts are simply not the governing philosophy of this ship, and she brought them in straight on the main dock approach, because she was a professional and because some part of her, the part that had watched him walk on water and talk Smoker into a strategic retreat and redirect Mihawk's black blade with 2 fingers, was quietly certain that whatever happened, he'd manage it. She hated that she was certain of that. It made exit planning considerably more complicated. The arrows came when they were 200 meters from the dock. Not a volley, a single arrow, fired with extraordinary precision, which hit the water exactly 1 meter ahead of the bow and stood in the sea floor at a slight angle, visibly quivering with the force of the shot. A warning. From 200 meters, hitting a 1-meter target ahead of a moving vessel. Nami noted the marksmanship with the involuntary appreciation of someone who recognizes genuine skill even while recognizing that it might kill her. A voice carried across the water with the natural amplification of someone who had been projecting command her entire life. "Turn back. No men may approach Amazon Lily. Turn back now or the next arrow finds the man on your bow." Naruto was standing on the bow. He called back across the water, not loudly, just clearly, his voice carrying the same way a bell carries, without effort. "I'm not here to cause trouble. I'd like to speak with your Empress." A pause. The kind of pause that held consultation in it. "She doesn't speak with men." "She'll speak with me," he said. Not arrogant. Just the flat certainty of someone stating a thing that will happen. Another pause. Longer. Then, "State your name." "Naruto." Silence. He could feel the assessment happening across the water, the women on the cliff tops shifting their weight, looking at each other, the specific social mathematics of a community deciding whether an anomaly requires its existing rules or new ones. He waited. The ship drifted at Nami's held position. A seabird passed overhead completely indifferent to the geopolitical situation. "Approach the dock," the voice said finally. "Weapons will be trained on you at all times. Any hostile action will be answered immediately." "Understood," he said. Nami exhaled through her nose and brought them in. The dock was lined with warriors. Not lined in a military sense, more in the sense that every available surface near the dock had a woman on it, fully armed, watching with the collective intensity of a community that has made a decision it intends to honor. They were extraordinary to look at, every variation of formidable, from the young archers on the upper platforms to the senior warriors at ground level who had the particular quality of people who had been fighting for so long that fighting had become their natural resting state. None of them looked afraid. Several of them looked curious. A few of them, Naruto noticed, were looking at him with an expression that was trying very hard not to be anything in particular and not quite succeeding. The woman who had spoken across the water was standing at the end of the dock. She was perhaps 40, with short cropped hair and the posture of someone who had spent decades being the most competent person in any given room and had long since stopped finding this remarkable. She looked at Naruto with professional directness. "I am Gloriosa," she said. "Elder of Amazon Lily." She looked at his eyes. Something moved in her expression, recognition, but of an old story rather than a person. "Those eyes," she said quietly. "You know them?" he said. "In the mythology of the Kuja," she said carefully, "there are stories of a figure with eyes like ringed moons. An entity that exists between living and dead." She held his gaze. "We call it the Keeper of the Crossing." Naruto looked at her. The Rinnegan reading the depth of the story she was drawing from. "I didn't know that," he said honestly. "No," she said. "You wouldn't." She looked at Nami and Robin on the ship, assessed them with the same directness. "Your companions stay aboard. You come with me." She looked back at him. "Empress Boa Hancock will decide what to do with you." "That's fair," he said. He followed her off the dock without looking back, which was either very confident or very trusting, and Nami watched him go with her arms crossed and the specific expression of someone who is not worried and is doing an excellent job of performing not being worried. "He'll be fine," Robin said from beside her. "I know," Nami said. "You're worried." "I'm not worried." Robin looked at her with those dark eyes that had a way of making statements by not making statements. Nami turned back to the wheel. "I'm slightly worried," she said. The village of Amazon Lily was everything the island promised from a distance, vivid, self-contained, built with the specific aesthetic of a culture that had only ever had to please itself. Architecture that was beautiful in the way things are beautiful when beauty is just what happens, not something anyone designed for. Streets where children ran and older women argued over market goods and warriors drilled in open spaces, all of it coexisting with the easy familiarity of a place that knew what it was. People stopped to look at him as he walked. No one spoke. The looking was comprehensive, not hostile, more like a collective assessment of a phenomenon that had turned up without warning. He caught one girl of about 12 who was staring with her mouth open and gave her a small wave. She turned bright red and disappeared into an alley. The palace was at the island center, built against the mountain's base, large in the way of buildings that are large because the people who live in them don't feel the need to be modest about it. Gloriosa led him through it at a pace that suggested she was giving him time to look, which he appreciated, and he looked, at the architecture, at the poneglyph he could feel somewhere in the lower levels, at the history embedded in the walls. The throne room was the island in miniature, vivid, self-certain, built for a person who was used to being the largest presence in any space. Boa Hancock was standing at the window, not seated. Her back was to him. She was wearing the robes of her station and her hair was down, and the physical reality of her was, Notable was the accurate word, the pure architectural beauty of someone who had been looked at so long and so absolutely that they'd achieved a kind of uncomfortable relationship with being seen. She knew exactly how she looked. She had learned to use it the way other people used weapons. She didn't turn immediately. The not turning was itself a statement, I will acknowledge you when I decide to. Naruto stood in the middle of the room and looked at the window. You can turn around, he said. I'm not going to be useful as a demonstration of whatever you're planning. She turned. Faster than she'd intended, he thought, the surprise overriding the performance. And then she looked at him, the full weight of her attention and her beauty landing like a physical force that was genuinely felt, not just acknowledged, and she waited. He looked back. Not with appreciation, not the devouring kind, but with the same attention he gave everything, the attention that was about understanding rather than want. The Rinnegan reading past the extraordinary surface to the person underneath, and what he found there was something nobody who looked at Boa Hancock ever looked for. He found somebody who hated being looked at. Her eyes changed when he didn't react the way people reacted. Not obviously, she was far too controlled for obvious, but a micro-shift in the jaw, in the grip of her hands at her sides, the specific recalibration of someone whose primary tool has just not worked. Your eyes are functional, she said. It was the first thing she said to him. Not a greeting, not a challenge. A data point. Yes, he said. Most men who see me, she stopped. Started again. My devil fruit. The marrow no me love fruit. Anyone who feels lust toward me is petrified. She said it with the practiced flatness of someone who has explained their most personal things so many times it's become a technical description. You don't feel lust. I find you very striking, he said honestly. But I'm not going to want something from you because of how you look. That's not how I work. She looked at him for a long moment. The controlled expression doing its job, but underneath it, something was happening. The thing that happened when a defense you've built around yourself your entire life is rendered unnecessary by someone who simply isn't attacking. Why are you here, she said. The log pose, he said. Which is strange, because this island's magnetic field shouldn't register on a standard log pose. But it did. He paused. I think it registered on something in the poneglyph you have in your lower levels. I have eyes that read those. The pose followed the signal. Her chin came up slightly. You know about the poneglyph. I know there's one here. I'd like to see it. He held her gaze. I'll ask. Not demand. Your island, your rules. She was quiet. Looking at him. Trying, he thought, to find the angle. Everyone who came here had an angle, a want, something they were maneuvering toward, and the beauty was the easiest lever because it was always there and always worked. Except it wasn't working. And the absence of it working seemed to be destabilizing, in a way she didn't have a category for. Sit down, she said abruptly. He sat. She remained standing for another moment, then sat too, in the throne, because she was the empress and the throne was appropriate. Gloriosa, who had been standing at the door, brought tea with the expression of someone who had seen a great many things and was updating their expectation of what constituted remarkable. You came from outside the Grand Line, Hancock said. It wasn't quite a question. East Blue, he said. Originally from further away than that. The Kuja have stories about you. She said it the same way Gloriosa had, not accusatory, more like naming a category that has just been confirmed. Eyes like ringed moons. The keeper of the crossing. I'm still learning what that means, he said. In our stories the keeper comes to take something. Her voice was very controlled. Or to bring something. What do the stories say it brings? She looked at him. Change, she said. And then, with a precision that suggested she was quoting something old, the kind that looks like an ending until you're on the other side of it. He was quiet for a moment. The tea sat on the table between them, untouched by either. Through the window the sounds of Amazon Lily went on its ordinary business, voices, the ring of a training weapon, a child laughing somewhere below. "I'm not here to take anything," he said. "And whatever I bring, I don't do it on purpose." He looked at her. "I'm just going in the direction I'm going and I tend to pick up things along the way." "Things," she said, and her tone had something in it that was almost wry. "People," he corrected. She looked at the window. At some internal landscape he couldn't fully see. "I am the Empress of Amazon Lily," she said. "A warlord of the sea. I have the highest bounty of any female pirate. This island has been my responsibility since I was 18 years old." She said it not proudly but accurately, the inventory of someone taking stock. "I don't go anywhere." "I didn't say you should. You said you pick up people." "I said that's what tends to happen." He held her gaze. "I didn't say it was a requirement." She looked at him with the full force of her attention, which was the most she'd deployed on any person who hadn't immediately started behaving in ways she could categorize. He held it without difficulty, not because he was indifferent but because he was genuinely interested in her without needing anything from her, and that combination, interest without need, he was beginning to understand, completely alien to her experience. "You're strange," she said. "I've been told," he said. Specifically and at length. Something cracked in her expression. Not broke, cracked, the way ice cracks when the temperature changes, not falling apart but showing the first lines of something that wants to move. She turned away from him and looked at the window for a moment. "I'll show you the poneglyph," she said. "On one condition." "Name it." "You eat with us tonight," she said. "Here." "The Kuja warriors." She looked back at him and there was a challenge in it, a test. "Let them see you. Ask you questions. Make up their minds." She paused. "If they decide you're worth tolerating, you can see the stone. And if they decide I'm not? Then we'll have a different conversation," she said. "Fair enough," he said. The dinner was extraordinary. Not the food, though the food was extraordinary, but the event of it. 100 Kuja warriors at long tables in the palace courtyard, all of them having been informed that there was a man at dinner, processing this information in real time. The spectrum of reactions ranged from deliberate indifference to open fascination to the specific aggressive curiosity of people who had opinions about men and were delighted to have a live sample for examination. They asked him everything. Not politely, directly, with the cultural honesty of a people who had never learned that directness was considered rude. What was he? Where was he from? What did the eyes do? Could he fight? What was he afraid of? Did he have a ship? Were the women on his ship his? Did he know he was aesthetically acceptable for a man? How strong was he? Could he lift the table? Had he seen the sea kings? Was it true that men were weak? Why didn't his eyes work on them? He answered everything. Directly. Without performance. And somewhere around the third hour, the quality of the room changed, the defensive assessments giving way to something more like the ease of people who have decided someone is not a threat and are now simply curious. Women started telling him things rather than just questioning him. Stories about the island, about the Kuja's history, about the sea kings they rode and the journeys to the calm belt. One veteran warrior with a jaw like a shelf spent 20 minutes telling him about the training system for young archers in a level of technical detail that he listened to completely, because he was genuinely interested. He looked at Hancock twice across the table. The first time she was already looking at him and looked away. The second time she was looking away but her jaw had changed, the set of it slightly different, less controlled, the expression of someone who is watching something they don't know how to account for and is finding, against their own expectations, that the not accounting for it is something close to pleasurable. After dinner she found him standing at the courtyard's edge, looking up at the palace mountain and the stars above it. "They like you," she said. She said it like this was a piece of data she'd collected and was delivering with scientific neutrality. "They're extraordinary," he said. "All of them. She stood beside him. Not close, careful distance, the distance of someone managing the geometry of a new situation. You meant that, she said. I usually mean things. She was quiet for a moment. Most visitors to Amazon Lily spend their time looking for the exits. Even the tolerated ones. She looked at the courtyard behind them, at the women still talking at the tables, at the easy power of a community that had built something real. You've been looking at us like you're trying to understand us. I am, he said. Why? He considered this honestly. Because what you've built here is genuinely remarkable, he said. A sovereign nation that answers to nothing but itself. A culture that decided its own terms and has been living by them long enough to actually mean them. He looked at her. That's rarer than anything. In any world. She looked at him. The control was present and it was thinner than it had been at the start of the evening, not gone, nothing was going to make it go quickly, but thinner. The cracks from the throne room were wider now and behind them was something that had been waiting a long time to see if anyone worth showing it to would turn up. Gloriosa told me, she said. The keeper of the crossing. In the old stories, the keeper doesn't stay anywhere. That's true so far, he said. So you're going, she said. Matter of fact. Arriving at it before he could, taking the sting out of it by naming it first. Yes, he said. But where I go, he looked at the horizon, the grand line beyond the island's western waters, it'll be visible. Whatever I build. It'll be substantial. He looked back at her. Amazon Lily doesn't have to move for that. It's already sovereign. It already stands. He paused. I'm not asking you to follow me. Then what are you asking, she said, and her voice had changed slightly, something careful in it, the vocal equivalent of someone opening a door slowly. I'm not asking anything, he said, and that was the most honest thing he'd said all evening, and she knew it, and the knowing of it moved through her face with a clarity she didn't bother to hide. Whatever you decide. Whatever you choose. It's yours. He held her gaze with the violet rings quiet now, not reading, just present. I just want you to know that you're seen. Not the warlord. Not the empress. Not the weapon. He paused. The person underneath all of that. She's extraordinary. And she's seen. The silence that followed was the loudest thing that had happened on Amazon Lily in recent memory. Hancock looked at him. The cracks in the control were gone, not because the control had reassembled but because it had been set down. Deliberately. The face that looked at him was the one underneath the performance, and it was, younger, somehow. Not less powerful. Younger in the sense of more alive, more present, more there. You said you don't want anything from me, she said. I don't, he said. Then what do you want? He smiled. The genuine one, no performance, just warmth. Right now. To see the poneglyph. She stared at him. Then she laughed, a real laugh, short and sharp, involuntary, and she looked away immediately like she could take it back if she was fast enough, and when she looked back she was composed but the laugh was still visible in the lines around her eyes. Come on, she said, and led him into the palace. The poneglyph was in the deepest chamber, and Robin came for it. Naruto had asked, and Hancock, after a long moment, had agreed. So Robin came off the ship and through the village with her journal open before she'd reached the chamber door, and she pressed her hands to the stone with the reverence of a scholar and the joy of someone arriving home after a long journey, and she read. Hancock watched her read. Then watched Naruto watch Robin read. She's been searching a long time, Hancock said quietly. Her whole life, he said. For the truth of the void century. For the truth of why her home was destroyed, he said. The void century is the method. O'Hara is the reason. He looked at Robin's back, the concentrated stillness of her, the complete absorption. She deserves to find it. Hancock looked at him sideways. You care about them both, she said. The navigator and this one. Yes. Differently. Everything's different, he said. Nothing works the same way twice. She was quiet. Then, with the careful precision of someone navigating unfamiliar terrain, how do I work? The question surprised her as much as him. He could see it land in her own expression before she could manage it. She hadn't planned to say that. He looked at her directly. Like someone who built a fortress so strong she can't remember that she doesn't have to live in it forever, he said. And is starting to wonder what's outside the walls. The silence after that was softer than the last one. Robin finished her reading and turned. She looked at Hancock with the specific expression she used when she found a text more valuable than expected. The routing stone, she said. It confirms the Western poneglyph sequence. She looked at Naruto. We're in the right constellation. Raftel is accessible from here. Not yet, he said. No, she agreed. But we know the direction. Hancock looked between them, the navigator and the archaeologist and the man with the ringed eyes, with an expression that was doing several things at once and managing all of them poorly, which was for her a significant achievement in honesty. Nami, she said. The navigator. She's been with you since the beginning. East Blue, yes. She's waiting on the ship, Hancock said. For you. He looked at her. She waits because she's a navigator and someone should be with the ship, he said. She waits, Hancock said, with the precision of someone who has observed a thing accurately and intends to name it, because she trusts that you'll come back. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, simply, yes. Hancock nodded. Looked at the poneglyph one more time. At the chamber that had been sealed and private for years, that she'd brought him into on the strength of a single evening and a laugh she hadn't planned to give. She looked at her own hands. The calm belt, she said. Amazon lily is surrounded by it. Sea kings. Impenetrable to most ships. She looked at him. How did you get through? The sea kings let us pass, he said. She blinked. Let you. They looked at the ship and moved aside, he said. I don't know if it was the eyes or just, he considered. I think they recognized the soul in the vessel. Or what I am. Or something. He shrugged one shoulder. We came through without any incident. Hancock looked at him for a long time. Then at Robin. Then she made the specific expression of someone who has been operating a sovereign nation with iron competence for a decade and is experiencing for the first time something she cannot manage, and who is, against everything she would have predicted, not finding that unmanageable. Akiji arrived the next morning. Not in a marine vessel. On a bicycle, which was insane on open water, but the water under his tires was frozen solid in a moving path ahead of him, the sea hardening just in time and releasing just after, a one-man ice road stretching back to the horizon. He was eating a popsicle. He reached the dock at Amazon Lily, dismounted, leaned the bicycle against a post that wasn't there until the ice made it, and looked at Naruto with the expression of a man who had been thinking about this meeting for some time. Kuzan. Akiji. Admiral of the Navy, which made him one of the 3 most powerful marine officers alive. But the thing Naruto read off him first wasn't power, it was exhaustion. The specific exhaustion of a genuinely good man inside a system he couldn't fix and couldn't leave and couldn't stop serving even when serving it cost him things that mattered. Heard you were here, Akiji said. He finished the popsicle, regarded the stick, put it in his pocket. Heard a lot of things about you, actually. Smoker's report was interesting. The Alabasta contact report was interesting. The Dead Island report was the most interesting. He looked at the eyes. Here in person you're, yeah. More interesting than the reports. You came alone, Naruto said. On purpose, Akiji said. This isn't an official visit. What is it? A conversation I wanted to have before things became complicated. He looked around at the Amazon Lily dock, at the Kuja warriors who had materialized from the surrounding area with arrows and attitudes. He looked at the arrows with mild professional acknowledgement and then looked away from them, which was either very brave or very confident. Is there somewhere we can talk? Here is fine, Naruto said. Akiji looked at the audience. Shrugged. Your poneglyph woman from the dead island, he said. Nico Robin. She's here. Yes. The world government is very interested in her location. I know. I'm aware that you know, Akiji said, patiently. I'm telling you as a data point, not as a threat. There's a difference. He looked at Naruto with the genuine tiredness of someone who has spent too many years navigating that difference. She's been running for 20 years. She was 8 years old when O'Hara burned. He let that land. I was there. The quality of the air around Naruto changed slightly. Not dramatically. Just, changed, the way a room changes when the temperature drops 1 degree. The Rinnegan was very still. You were there, Naruto said. I was a captain. I didn't light the fires. He looked at the horizon. But I was there. And I have to live with what that means. He looked back. I'm not asking for absolution. I'm telling you because if you're going to be involved with her then you should know who the players are and what they carry. He paused. I won't report her location from this visit. That's the other reason I came alone. Naruto looked at him. The Rinnegan reading the depth of it, not trick, not strategy. Just a man navigating the gap between what he served and what he believed with every tool he had. Why, he said. Why not report it? Because she was 8 years old, Akiji said. And they burned everything. And 20 years of running is enough. He looked at the sea. That's not marine policy. That's me. He glanced back. There are things I can do quietly within my position and things I can't. Not reporting this location is something I can do quietly. Naruto was quiet for a moment. You can't protect her long term, he said. No, Akiji agreed. That's your problem now, I think. Is that why you came? To hand the problem over? I came, Akiji said, because I wanted to see what you are before I decided how much of a problem you were going to be. He looked at the eyes again. At the caravel at the dock. At the impossible fact of a man standing on Amazon Lily while Kuja warriors watched him from the rooftops. Verdict's still out, he said. But so far you haven't done anything that makes my life harder in the ways that actually matter. What ways actually matter? Naruto said. Akiji was quiet for a long time. The sea moved. The ice bicycle dripped slightly in the morning sun. Civilians, he said finally. The ones who don't have anyone. The ones the system was supposedly built for and keeps forgetting about. He looked at Naruto with tired gold eyes. If you're building something, and I think you are, build it for them. Or at least don't build it against them. That's not a policy, Naruto said. That's a request. Yes, Akiji said. It is. He picked up his bicycle. The ice path reformed in front of it. The Gorosei are going to notice you soon if they haven't already, he said. When they do, it won't be quiet men on bicycles. It'll be something else. He looked at Naruto one last time. I'd have that conversation with your ship before then. He rode away on his ice road with the improbable serenity of a very large man on a very small bicycle, and the sea froze and thawed in his wake, and Naruto watched him go until the horizon took him. Hancock appeared at his elbow, having watched the whole exchange from the dock's edge. Akiji, she said. Yes. He let Nico Robin go, she said. He let her go 20 years ago and didn't know how to say it, Naruto said. This was him finally saying it. She was quiet for a moment. Then, you're leaving today. I should. She looked at the horizon where the admiral had gone. At her island behind her, the sounds of it, the weight and warmth of it. At the caravel at the dock. At Naruto standing in the morning light with the ringed eyes and the complete certainty of someone who knows what they are. "I'll contact you," she said. Precise. Decided. The Empress making a choice, not hedging around one. Through the Kuja network. We have communications that the world government can't intercept. She looked at him directly. When the time comes, when whatever you're building needs someone who runs a sovereign nation and rides sea kings, I will contact you. He looked at her. Hancock. Don't thank me, she said. It's a strategic decision. Is it? The corner of her mouth moved. Almost. Mostly, she said. He almost said something else. Looked at her, the Empress, the warlord, the girl who had built a fortress and was standing at its gate deciding whether to open it, and said, simply, okay. He went aboard. Nami had the lines ready. Robin was at the bow with her journal, writing. The caravel moved away from the dock, and Naruto stood at the stern and watched Amazon Lily diminish as they moved toward the calm belt, toward the open Grand Line, toward whatever was next. Hancock stood on the dock until they were a speck. Then she went back to being the Empress, which she was very good at, and felt something in her chest that was either the beginning of something or the return of something she thought she'd lost a long time ago, and she was too honest with herself, alone on the dock, to pretend it was nothing. Below the water, the sea kings parted. The caravel passed through the calm belt like a hand through silk. Chapter 5, 3 crowns, 1 throne. The world noticed on a Tuesday. Not all at once, the world rarely did anything all at once, it was too large and too self-occupied for unified attention. It noticed in pieces, the way a body notices a change in temperature, one nerve at a time. A marine field report from the East Blue that got passed up 3 levels before anyone took it seriously. A Baroque Works intelligence summary that Crocodile read twice and set aside in a specific drawer he reserved for things that required patience. A message from Amazon Lily's Kuja network that moved through 6 relay points before arriving at a destination no one had authorized it to go to. Mihawk, cleaning his blade on a dark night somewhere in the Grand Line, putting the cloth down and looking at the water for a long time. The Gorosei noticed on a Wednesday. And Big Mom noticed on a Thursday, which was the one that mattered. The island was called Fullmast, which was not its original name but was what the charts called it, and it was the kind of Grand Line island that existed as a pivot point, equidistant from several Yonko territories, close enough to a major current highway that every significant ship in the New World passed within viewing distance at some point. It had a town. The town had a market. The market had everything you needed if you were moving through the Grand Line and needed to not stop at a place where someone would recognize you. They'd been there 4 days when the atmosphere changed. Nami felt it first. She felt changes in atmosphere the way she felt changes in weather, as a physical thing, a shift in pressure. She was at the market buying provisions and the sound of the place changed, not loudly, more like a song dropping a key, and she looked around and found the source. A woman. Pink hair, extraordinary height, moving through the market with the specific gravitational presence of someone who had been the largest thing in every room they'd ever entered and had long since stopped noticing. She wasn't Big Mom, she was Big Mom's ambassador, which was visible in the flag on her coat and the 6 men with her and the way the market traffic was parting around her the way water parts around something that isn't going to move. Charlotte Smoothie. 3rd daughter of the Charlotte family. One of the sweet commanders. She walked through the market looking at nothing and seeing everything, and her eyes found the caravel at the dock with the focus of someone who had come here specifically to find it. Nami bought her provisions quickly and went back to the ship at a pace that was professionally unhurried and actually fast. Big Mom sent someone, she said, coming aboard. Naruto was on the deck. He'd been there most of the morning, sitting with his back against the mast, doing the thing he sometimes did that wasn't quite meditation and wasn't quite sleep, just existing very fully with his eyes closed, the Rinnegan cycling slowly underneath his lids, reading the island, reading the sea around it, reading the shape of things. He opened his eyes when she spoke. Robin looked up from her journal at the table near the bow. Sweet Commander. Naruto said. Smoothie, Nami said. She set the provisions down. She's heading this way. How many people? 6 visible. More on whatever ship brought her, probably. He stood. Not urgently. He moved at his own pace, which was unhurried but arrived. He looked at the dock, at Smoothie's approach. She was visible now, the pink hair impossible to miss, walking with the ease of someone who had decided this interaction would be simple. She wasn't wrong that it would be simple. She was wrong about who would be controlling the simplicity. "I'll talk to her," he said. "You always say that," Nami said. "It always works. One day it won't." "Today isn't that day," he said, and stepped onto the dock. Smoothie was taller up close. She was also, he noticed, the rare kind of powerful person who didn't lead with their power. She led with a kind of pleasant reasonableness that was more unsettling than aggression because it required you to be unreasonable first. She stopped 10 feet from him on the dock and looked at him with amber eyes that were doing thorough work. "Naruto," she said. Not a question, she'd been briefed. "Smoothie," he said. A slight adjustment in her expression, she hadn't expected her name. "You know who I am. Charlotte Smoothie. 3rd daughter of the Charlotte family. Yonko Big Mom's sweet commander. You can squeeze the moisture from anything, including people." He tilted his head. "Good to meet you." She looked at him for a moment. "You've been making noise," she said. "East Blue. Alabasta Waters. The Dead Island. Amazon Lily." She listed these like items on a ledger. "Whoever you are, you keep turning up in places that matter and then leaving them changed." "Places change," he said. "It's what they do. Not like this." She kept her tone pleasant. Reasonable. The tool she'd arrived with. "Big Mom is interested in you. She's interested in the women on your ship too." Her gaze moved to the caravel, to Nami at the rail, to Robin at the bow. A navigator with the most complete Grand Line charts in private hands and an archaeologist who can read poneglyphs. She looked back at him. "Those are substantial assets." "They're not assets," he said. "They're people. Big Mom's people are well taken care of." "I didn't say they weren't," he said. "I said they're people. Not assets. Not resources. Not things that get assigned value based on their utility to someone else." He looked at her. "Smoothie. Your mother has built something extraordinary. A family, a nation, a dream of a world without discrimination. That's genuine. The thing that corrupts it is that she treats every person she meets as a piece of that dream rather than a dreamer in their own right." He paused. "I'm not going to deliver anyone to that." Smoothie's reasonable expression did something small and complicated. "You're refusing." "Yes. Big Mom doesn't receive refusals well." "I know." He held her gaze. "Tell her I said no, and tell her I said it with respect. Tell her what I am if you know, and if your intelligence is good, you have some idea. Tell her that whatever she sends next, I'll send back, and tell her I'd rather that conversation happen between us directly than through intermediaries." He paused. "She's a Yonko. She deserves to hear it from me directly." Smoothie looked at him for a long time. The amber eyes reassessing several things simultaneously. "You're not afraid of her," she said. "No. Most people are. Most people have something they're afraid of losing," he said. "I've already lost everything once. It turns out it didn't end things." He looked at her directly. "I don't say that to be aggressive. I say it because it's the most accurate summary of my situation I can give you." He tilted his head slightly. "You personally, you're not here because you believe in this errand. You're here because you were sent. What do you actually think of what I just said?" The reasonable expression wavered for a fraction of a second. "Not much. Enough. I think," she said carefully, "that my mother is going to find this conversation very interesting." "Good," he said. She should. Interesting people should meet. Smoothie looked at him one more time. Then she turned and walked back through the market the way she'd come, and her 6 men filed after her, and the market traffic unparted and went back to its business, and Nami was beside him on the dock before Smoothie had cleared the market entrance. That went well, Nami said. It went fine. She's going to report back that we're here. Yes. And Big Mom is going to send something significantly larger than one sweet commander. Yes, he said. He looked at the horizon. We should finish provisioning. She stared at him. That's your response to knowing Big Mom is going to send a fleet at us? Finish provisioning. We're going to need provisions, he said reasonably. She made the sound, the one she made when she was equal parts exasperated and unable to argue with the logic. It was one of his favorite sounds. He went back to the ship. Robin was waiting. Not anxiously, she didn't wait anxiously, she waited with the quality of someone who has decided to use whatever time is available. She had the journal open and she looked up when he came aboard, and her dark eyes had the particular depth of someone who has been thinking about something serious and has arrived at the point of saying it. Akiji said the Gorosei would notice us, she said. Big Mom is already sending people. Crocodile is still watching. She closed the journal. The world is organizing itself around us. And we're on a borrowed caravel with 3 people and provisions for 2 weeks. She looked at him. What are we actually building? He sat down on the deck, leaning back on his hands, looking at the sky. Nami came aboard a few minutes later and set her provisions down and looked between them and sat down too, because the quality of the moment required sitting. Tell us, Nami said. Not a demand. The voice she used when she was ready to do planning, the navigator's voice, the one that built routes from information. You've had this in your head. We've been moving toward it without naming it. Name it. He looked at them both. At Nami, who had been running a long con against the world since she was old enough to understand what Arlong had taken, who had made the most extraordinary maps in the East Blue because her mind couldn't stop finding patterns in chaos and she might as well make them beautiful. At Robin, who had eaten loneliness for 2 decades and turned it into the most profound scholarship alive, who deserved not just to find the truth but to be protected while she told it. A sovereign domain, he said. Not a pirate crew, we're not plundering anyone. Not a nation exactly, we don't have territory. Something in between. He looked at the sky. The world government controls information. The Yonko control territory. The warlords control reputation. He paused. None of those are what I'm after. Then what? Robin said. Legitimacy, he said. The kind that doesn't need anyone to grant it. The kind that comes from being something real and substantial enough that the world has to acknowledge it exists. He looked at them. The void century. The ancient weapons. The real history of this world. That's what needs to come out. Not because the world government is wrong about everything, they're wrong about this specific thing, the thing they've been killing people to hide. He looked at Robin. You've been doing this alone. You shouldn't have to. Robin held his gaze. Her hands were in her lap. The journal was closed. You want to build something that can protect that work, she said. I want to build something that makes the work impossible to stop, he said. Something that has enough weight in the world that attacking it costs more than it's worth. Something with a navigator who can move it anywhere. With an archaeologist who can read every record it needs to find. He paused. With more people. Different capabilities. Eventually. Eventually Hancock, Nami said. He glanced at her. She was looking at the dock with her navigator's face on, which was the face she put on when she was thinking something she was also feeling but had decided thinking was the appropriate category for now. She said she'd reach out, he said. She'll reach out, Nami said. I watched her watch you leave Amazon Lily. She'll reach out. She paused. I'm not, she stopped. Restarted. I'm not saying that as a complaint. I know, he said. I'm saying it as a, she moved her hand slightly, a gesture that didn't have a word attached to it. A logistics note. Robin almost smiled. It was the almost smile of someone watching two other people not say a thing that they are saying. Nami looked at him. The navigator's face still on but something else behind it, the thing she'd been not examining since that morning on the beach in Alabastus Cove when she'd woken up with her head on his shoulder. I'm in, she said. I was in from the minute you told Smoker to let the ship go. I'm just telling you now officially. She held his gaze. But I need you to understand what I'm building too. My village. Kokoyashi. Arlong. She said the name flat and clean, the way you say the name of a problem you've decided is solvable. That needs to happen. It'll happen, he said. You don't have to, Nami. He looked at her, and the ringed eyes were very direct. I know you can handle it yourself. I know you've been handling things yourself since you were a child. I know that's not the point. He held her gaze. It'll happen. Whatever you need. That's not negotiable. The navigator's face did something it didn't usually do in the presence of a third party. She looked away first, which was rare. Fine, she said. Good. She looked at the horizon. Then we need a better ship. The ship arrived from Amazon Lily 6 hours later. It was not a small ship. The Kuja vessel was built for the calm belt, reinforced hull, deep draft, rigged for heavy weather, and crewed by 12 Kuja warriors who came aboard the dock with the economy of movement that characterized everyone from that island. Their leader was a young woman named Marguerite, who presented herself to Naruto with the directness of someone delivering a message that had been very specifically worded. Empress Boa Hancock sends this vessel, Marguerite said. And these words, a sovereign domain requires a sovereign vessel. The Kuja have no use for debt. Consider it the cost of making things interesting. She looked at him with the bright focus of a young warrior who had been waiting her whole life to be sent on exactly this kind of errand. She also sends these. She handed him a sealed letter. He opened it. Read it. His expression moved through several things. What does it say? Nami said. He handed it to her. She read it. Her expression also moved through several things, ending somewhere between impressed and something she was choosing not to name. She handed it to Robin. Robin read it, and her expression did the thing it did, the flash underneath the control, and she handed it back. She's coming, Nami said. When she's ready, Naruto said. On her terms. She's resigning the warlord position, Robin said. That letter is notification. She's severing from the world government. She looked at Naruto. That's not a small thing. No, he said. It isn't. She's doing it because of you. She's doing it because she decided to, he said. I didn't ask her to do anything. Robin looked at him with the eyes that read things. That, she said, is exactly why she's doing it. They transferred to the Kuja vessel that evening, Nami immediately and comprehensively taking over the navigation function, which the Kuja crew accepted with the pragmatic equanimity of people who respected demonstrated competence. Robin set up her workspace at a table below deck and began the process of cross-referencing what the Amazon Lily Poneglyph had given her with everything else she had. Naruto stood at the new ship's bow and looked at the Grand Line and felt the shape of things. The night was 3 hours old when the fleet appeared. Not one ship. Not 5. 32 vessels of varying size materialized from the dark with the organized efficiency of a military operation, and at the center of the formation was a ship so large it changed the local horizon, the Queen Mama Chanter, Big Mom's flagship, lit from stern to bow like a floating city. There it is, Nami said from behind him. Her voice was controlled, the navigator's voice, but underneath it was the thing that happened when the math of a situation was very clear and very large. 32 ships. What's the plan? Same as always, he said. Talk to them, she said, in the tone of someone who has accepted their situation. Talk to her, he said. There's a difference. He looked at the fleet. The Rinnegan opened fully, not in threat, just in comprehension, reading the full weight of what was out there. 32 ships. Several hundred soldiers at minimum. Devil fruit users among the sweet commanders, who would be on that flagship. Big Mom herself, whose power was genuinely extraordinary, the soul fruit, the ability to rip the lifespan from people, the homies that ran on stolen life, the pure physical strength of a woman who had been catastrophically powerful since childhood. He felt all of it. And then he put one foot on the air and walked toward it. The Queen Mama chanter was, up close, genuinely impressive. The figurehead was her own face, which was the kind of confident statement that required follow-through, and Big Mom had always followed through. The deck was lit and manned and the sweet commanders were visible, Smoothie, and beside her Cracker with his biscuit soldiers already forming, and Katakuri at the rail looking at the approaching figure on the water with the red eyes that could see slightly into the future doing their work. Naruto walked up to the side of the flagship and stopped, standing on the water 10 feet from the hull. Charlotte Lin, he said. Loud enough to carry. Using her name. Her real name, not the title. I'd like to talk. The silence from the ship stretched for 15 seconds. Then the massive figure appeared at the rail, and Big Mom was everything her legend described and more, the sheer physical presence of her, the hair, the size, the eyes that had consumed enough of the world's life force to have the particular quality of something immeasurably full. She looked down at him on the water. You're small, she said. Her voice was enormous. Relatively, he agreed. You sent Smoothie back empty-handed. I told Smoothie I'd rather have this conversation directly, he said. And here you are. So. Something moved in Big Mom's face, not quite amusement. More like the recalibration of someone whose expectation of this meeting has just been significantly revised. She looked at his feet on the water. At his eyes. She'd been briefed too, and the briefing had been thorough, and she was making the specific calculations of someone who has been the largest thing in the room for so long that encountering something genuinely uncertain is genuinely rare. You want the navigator and the archaeologist, she said. You're building something. Yes, he said. In my waters. In the Grand Line, he said. Which is large. Not large enough for something I don't understand, she said. I don't like things I don't understand. I collect them or I remove them. I know, he said. Charlotte Lin. You built something real. A crew, a family, a dream of equality that you've bled for. It's genuine. I'm not dismissing it. He looked up at her. But you can't collect everything. The things you've tried to collect that didn't want to be collected, look at what they cost you. Her eyes narrowed. Are you giving me advice? I'm giving you information, he said. What you do with it is yours. He held her gaze. The navigator and the archaeologist aren't available. Not because I'm keeping them from you, because they've chosen where they are. Any attempt to take them will be returned. Forcefully. He said it with no anger, no bluster. Just the flat certainty of someone who has examined a fact and reported it. And that outcome is going to be more expensive than whatever value you think they represent. Big Mom looked at him for a long time. Katakuri, beside her, was very still in the way he got still when he was seeing forward in time and finding something he needed to think about. Smoothie looked at the flagship's deck. You walked through the calm belt, Big Mom said. The Sea Kings. Moved aside, yes. Even I don't get that, she said. And it was, not quite honest, but more honest than most things Big Mom said in a tactical situation. A genuine acknowledgement. I know, he said. What are you, she said. Not the way people usually asked, as challenge or as fear. The way someone asks when they actually want to know. Something new, he said. It was always true. Something that isn't inside any of your categories. I'm not a Yonko, not a warlord, not a marine, not any kind of pirate you've encountered. I'm building something that doesn't have a name yet. He paused. But it will. And when it does, I'd rather it be something that doesn't have to fight you every time our paths cross. Big Mom was quiet. The fleet around her was quiet. The Grand Line at night moved around them all, indifferent as it always was, going about its enormous business. You want a non-aggression agreement, she said. I want us to understand each other well enough that neither of us makes a mistake, he said. That's not the same thing, but it produces the same outcome. She looked at Katakuri. The future reader looked back at her. Something passed between them in the specific language of people who've worked together a long time. Katakuri's expression was unreadable, which from him was information. The archaeologist, Big Mom said. She reads poneglyphs. Yes. The void century. When she finds the truth, she stopped. Then, with a surprisingly direct honesty, some of that truth involves the founding families. Involves what the world government was built on. Her eyes were very still. Involves things some of us may not find comfortable. Probably, Naruto said. And you're going to let her tell it anyway. I'm going to make sure she can, he said. The truth isn't a weapon against anyone who didn't do the thing it describes. History doesn't care who finds it uncomfortable. It just is. Another silence. Big Mom's hand was on the rail and her knuckles were doing something that wasn't quite tension and wasn't quite decision. If the truth burns me, she said, you expect me to accept it. I expect you to do whatever you're going to do, he said. I'm not naive about that. But you asked, and that's the honest answer. He looked at her. You're complicated. This world is complicated. But the truth is the truth and it doesn't actually become different depending on who finds it inconvenient. He paused. I think you know that. You've known inconvenient truths your whole life and you're still standing. Big Mom looked at him. Then she did the thing that no one around her expected. She laughed. It was enormous, the way everything about her was enormous, filling the night, rolling across the water and bouncing off the hull of the surrounding fleet ships, and it wasn't hostile laughter, it was the genuine laughter of someone who has found a situation so far outside their normal experience that the only honest response is delight. You're impossible, she said. Frequently, he agreed. If I wanted to take the women on your ship by force, she said, the laughter settling into something still amused but more considered, what happens? Try it and find out, he said. No heat. No posturing. Just the flat certainty of someone stating a conditional fact. She looked at Katakuri again. This time the future reader's expression shifted, barely, a tightening around the eyes, the look of someone who has seen the answer to a question and has decided it's better to change the question. He gave his mother the smallest shake of his head. Big Mom looked back at the small figure standing on the water below her. Fine, she said, with the decisive weight of someone who has made a strategic choice and is comfortable with it. Not a non-aggression pact, I don't make those with people I don't respect enough to consider a threat. She paused deliberately. A professional acknowledgement. You exist. I'm aware of it. We move around each other. That works, Naruto said. And when the archaeologist finds something that involves my family, you'll hear it from me directly, he said. Before anyone else. That's a promise. She looked at him for one more long moment. Smoothie said you were reasonable, she said. Smoothie was generous, he said. She was accurate, Big Mom said. She doesn't do generous. She turned from the rail. The fleet began its reorganization, the ships changing their geometry from encirclement to departure, and 32 vessels of the Big Mom pirates moved east into the dark with the organized efficiency of a fighting force that has made a decision and is executing it. Naruto stood on the water until they were gone. He came back to the ship and Nami was at the rail and Robin was behind her and the Kuja crew were occupying the rest of the deck in the specific arrangement of people who have been watching something extraordinary and are still processing. Well? Nami said. Professional acknowledgement, he said. We exist. She's aware. Nami stared at him. You convinced Big Mom to stand down an armada with a conversation. She made a rational decision, he said. I just made sure she had accurate information. Naruto, she said. Yes. She stopped. Looked at the dark water where 32 ships had just been. That's not normal, she said. What you do? It's not normal. No, he agreed. I know I keep saying that. I know, he said. I keep agreeing. She looked at him. Something in her face that had been careful for weeks, not closed, never fully closed, but careful, the face of someone who had learned that hope was a resource that needed management, something in it stopped managing. Why did you come back to the ship, she said. Before. With Hancock. With all of it. You could be, she made a gesture outward, toward the Grand Line, toward everything. You're what you are. You could be anywhere doing anything. Why do you keep coming back to the ship? He looked at her. Because the ship is where you are, he said. Simply. Completely. The way he said true things. The careful something in her face went away entirely. She crossed the distance between them in 2 steps and she kissed him, and it was the kiss of someone who has been calculating exits for so long that choosing to stop calculating is the bravest thing they've ever done. He put one hand against her jaw and kissed her back with the warmth of someone who has been waiting for exactly this and is in absolutely no rush. When they separated, Robin was looking at the horizon with the expression of someone giving 2 other people privacy while standing 6 feet away, which she managed with considerable dignity. I'm happy for you, Robin said to the horizon. Thank you, Nami said, not quite steadily. It was quite obvious, Robin said. From approximately the 2nd day. It was not obvious from the 2nd day, Nami said. The morning on the beach in Alabasta when you woke up with your head on his shoulder and pretended it didn't happen, Robin said. 2nd day. Nami opened her mouth. Closed it. Looked at Naruto, who was not going to say anything about this because he had a survival instinct that worked in directions that didn't involve Marines or Yonko. Fine, Nami said. It was obvious. They were 3 days out of full mast when the letter came. It arrived in the way Kuja messages arrived, delivered by a bird that didn't look like a messenger bird, containing a note written in Hancock's specific handwriting, which was extremely elegant and slightly ruthless in its precision, like the woman herself. Naruto, read it. Read it again. Passed it to Nami. Nami read it with her navigator's eyes moving at speed and then sat down, which she only did when something required sitting. She resigned the warlord position, she said. 3 days ago. It's official. She looked up. She's coming to us. When she's ready, he said. The letter says 2 weeks, Nami said. When she's ready, he said again. 2 weeks is an estimate. She's closing down her relationship with the world government, transferring Amazon Lily's sovereign protections to independent standing, and organizing the Kuja fleet. He looked at the letter. That takes the time it takes. Nami handed the letter to Robin. Robin read it with her careful eyes and her careful expression and something warm in both. She says, Robin paused. At the end. She says, and her voice did something that was not quite controlled. She cleared her throat. To the archaeologists specifically, O'Hara was not the end of what it built. What it built sent its best work into the world before the fire. Find everything. She was quiet for a moment. She researched O'Hara. Yes, Naruto said. She did that for me. She did that because she wanted to, he said. Same principle applies. Robin held the letter for a long moment. Then she set it down precisely on the table. She'll be difficult, she said. Proud. Used to being the most important person in any situation. Opinionated about things she's certain about and certain about a great many things. Yes, he said. She and Nami will fight. Probably, Nami said. And then we'll be fine. You've pre-accepted it, Robin said. I've accepted that anyone worth keeping around is going to be difficult sometimes, Nami said. That's just people. She looked at Naruto. Present company included. I'm not difficult, he said. Both women looked at him with the specific unified expression of two people who have arrived independently at the same conclusion. Right, he said. Fair. He went to the bow that night while the others slept and the Kuja crew ran the watch, and he sat with his legs over the side and his feet on the air above the dark water, and he looked at the grand line spreading out in every direction, the impossible sea that didn't follow the rules of anything else. He thought about what he was. Not with anxiety, he'd passed through the anxiety stage somewhere in the East Blue and hadn't found it again. He thought about it with the interested clarity of someone examining a thing they've come to understand. He had been a boy in a village that didn't want him, and he'd decided to make them see him. He'd been a shinobi in a world built on cycles of violence, and he'd decided to be the one who broke the cycle. He'd been a man who loved people so completely that when the last war came he'd stepped into the Shinigami's reach with both hands open and said, "Take me instead," and the Shinigami had looked at him and said no, not no to his sacrifice, but no to his ending. You don't end, the Shinigami had said, or he remembered it saying, in that way of things remembered from before death that are more impression than word. You don't end. You become. So he'd become. The Rinnegan pulsed. Below the water, something enormous and ancient moved, a sea king, one of the great ones, sliding beneath the ship in the dark. He looked down. It looked up. The old eye, the eye that had watched this sea for longer than most civilizations had existed, met his, and held. Then it moved on. Peaceful. Purposeful. He looked at the stars. At the impossible geometry of the Grand Line's constellations, which were different from any world he'd known. He thought about Robin and the poneglyphs, the long patient record that a dead civilization had left for whoever cared enough to find it, the truth about the void century that he could feel getting closer the way you feel a horizon getting closer, not visible yet but inevitable. He thought about what came after that truth. About what the world did with it. About whether knowing the thing that had been hidden could actually change anything, or whether it just became another weapon in a world that already had too many. He thought about Nami, asleep below deck, maps spread around her, her mind running charts even in her sleep probably. The woman who had been running a con against the world since childhood and had finally, stopped running. Who was building something real instead of escaping towards something provisional. He thought about Hancock, 2 weeks out, closing the books on one life and deciding something else. The Empress who had built a fortress against being seen and was choosing, deliberately, to open a gate. He thought about how she'd laughed on the dock, the involuntary real laugh, and felt something warm about it that was specific to her, to the specific shape of who she was. They were different, the three of them. Everything about them was different. And what they felt for him was different, and what he felt for each of them was different, and none of that was simple or easy or going to become simple or easy, and he was entirely unconcerned about that. He was the god of death. He had loved an entire village, an entire nation, an entire world in his last life. Love was not a resource that depleted. It was a practice that refined. Every person you loved truly changed the shape of how you loved the next person, added to it, made it more specific and more capacious simultaneously. He had enough. He had more than enough. He would always have more than enough. The Grand Line spread before him, and behind him the ship moved with the steady purpose of something that knew where it was going even if it hadn't arrived yet. The Kuja crew ran the watch with quiet efficiency. The stars wheeled overhead. In Marineford, a Gorosei opened a file and read a report and said nothing for a very long time. In Alabasta, crocodile moved a piece on a board that nobody else could see yet. In Amazon Lily, Boa Hancock stood at the island's highest point and looked at the sea and felt the horizon pulling at her like a tide. In the New World, Mihawk cleaned his blade and looked at the water and did not go back to what he had been doing. 3 weeks later the ship that wasn't supposed to exist was visible from 6 different islands. It flew no flag. It flew nothing. Just sails and hull and the 3 women on deck who had decided, separately and completely, to build something real, Nami at the wheel with her charts and her certainty, Robin at the bow with her journal and her lifelong purpose finally housed in something that could protect it, and Hancock at the stern having arrived on her own ship and stepped aboard with the composure of an empress and the careful, fierce aliveness of someone who has just made the best decision of their life. They had argued. Of course they had. Within 20 minutes of Hancock's arrival Nami and she had been in a disagreement about the optimal route to the next Poneglyph waypoint that had been loud enough to bring the Kuja crew up from below in mild alarm, and Robin had watched it with an expression that was the most openly amused she ever got, and Naruto had sat on the rail and not involved himself, and after 12 minutes the argument had resolved into a route that was neither of their original proposals but was better than both. Which was, he thought, exactly right. He stood at the bow now and looked at the Grand Line and behind him were 3 of the most extraordinary people he'd ever encountered in any world, and around him was a sea that didn't follow normal rules, which suited him perfectly, and ahead of him was everything. The Rinnegan pulsed once. Twice. The rhythm of a second heartbeat, the heartbeat of something that had chosen to continue when it didn't have to. He breathed in the salt air. Somewhere far behind them, in the east blue, a fishing village called Corda was having an ordinary morning. Old Brennan was down at the shore, talking to the water. The tide was coming in. The sea was doing what it always did, vast and indifferent and full of everything that had ever happened in it, all the lives and losses and choices and continuations, the whole enormous ongoing record of a world that didn't stop. He'd washed ashore there not even 2 months ago. Face down in the shallows with no memory and all his power and a name carved into the bones of reality. What are you? People kept asking. Something new, he always said. And it was always true. He looked at the horizon. At the place where the sea met the sky and the Grand Line went on, further than anyone had fully charted, all the way to the end of the world where Raftel waited with its truth and its silence and the answer to the question Robin had been living inside since she was 8 years old. He was going there. They were going there. The ship moved forward. The god of death, in a world that had never seen anything like him, sailed on.